All right, we're back live with the Inconvenient stream on climate change after show. I won't be running this. I got some stuff to do. Colorado Biker Prepper will be running this. I also got Christopher and Brian and anybody else who wants to come in and join. That's fine. Just ask them for the link specifically. Try to ask Prepper for the link. Send him a G plus message. Send him a Facebook. Send him a Twitter. Whatever. If he knows who you are, he's going to give you the link and you guys can come in. But I know he knows a lot about this topic. He's going to kind of do a little critique of what I think he got from the evaluation of Dr. Post's argument, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be pretty much exactly what I would say, because as I was telling these people in here before we went on air, when we went off air of the show, I was trying to make sure that Dr. Post didn't think I was challenging him as far as like questioning his science, and he didn't take that way at all. He actually thought I must asked amazing questions. He said, "Yeah, everything you have said is completely in line with conventional physics." And he understood that I want to make sure that the audience is exposed to conventional understanding of physics before they, have any other thing of any kind of other hypotheses or any other kind of narrative. Because in reality is if you go to college or something like that and you take a physics course, you have to understand it conventionally first before anything else. So I just want to make sure the information is proper out there. And I do question myself often. People know that I do ask for validation a lot, and it's twofold. One, I've been out of this stuff for so long and I don't have any expertise in this, so I do want to make sure that I'm putting out legit information, and I want to make sure that I'm not misleading people. I do have a concern about that. I want to be validated in that regard. I don't care about being validated as far as right. That's the other thing people say. I don't give a shit about that, whether I'm right or wrong. Correct me. I just want to make sure that the narrative is correct going out to the listeners so they know proper information. That's all. But anyways, Prepper, I'm going to leave it to you here. I'm going to be probably listening in off and on. I'm going to be working around the house here. I got some stuff to do, but I'll probably be listening as we go. And so I might throw in something every so often. Okay.
But that sounds great. Thank you very much for setting this up. I know I appreciate it and everybody else does. So thank you and welcome. Welcome, everyone. So let's kind of go over basically what the good doctor was saying about climate change. I don't think that we touched on a lot of the stuff that I had some questions about, but I think we got more into the science of it. I think that a lot of it also has to do with the way that the message has been, disseminated recently in the mass media and in the media and just in social culture. The way that it's been a lot of hyperbolic language and rhetoric about climate change, carbon this, carbon that, when there's a lot more to it. The climate is not just affected by one thing. I think there's a multitude of stuff that affects it. I think that we're part of the problem. I think we're actually having an effect, but I don't think that it is the sole effect of our carbon output that the media and the mass media and social culture is portraying it as. I think it's a lot more diverse and nuanced than most of what people understand it to be. So, if anybody wants a link in here, please send me a private or send me a message at my Gmail, and I'll have that up. I actually got to pull that up, but Christopher, what did you think about it? What did you think about his science, or what would you like to contribute?
I mean, I thought I'm not really qualified to talk on his science particularly. I mean, but I thought what he said really, I had no major disagreements or anything with it. And I'm like you said, I completely agree that while we're definitely part of the problem, there's so much more to factor into it. Like, we're coming off of an ice age still after the last several thousand years. Coming up, and there's various things that are contributing to the climate change right now. So it's definitely what we've got is, like you said, just the hyperbolic rhetoric going on right now.
Okay, and Brian, how you doing, Brian? Come on in and give us your overview. Hey. I'm assuming that you watched the last stream.
Yeah, I'm still a little bit skeptical. I think it is in part due to my lack of knowledge on the subject. I do want to be open-minded. Basically, where I'm coming from is the climate change, the rhetoric. When you go back to Al Gore's book back in the 70s on how we're all going to be.
Yeah, his film, An Inconvenient Truth.
No. It goes way back. I'm talking. Well,
yeah, before that, but
yeah, basically, it was an environmentalist. It seemed like an environmentalist scare tactic. However, and also there was the. I'm not sure if you're familiar with ClimateGate.
ClimateGate. Give me another reference.
ClimateGate basically was a independent journalist investigation into the scientists that were involved.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I am familiar with that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm kind of in a strait betwixt the two. There does seem to be other scientists out there that have no dog in the fight, but the science that they're showing is, yes, the climate is definitely being affected, and here's the results. So I'm open-minded. I'm willing to learn, but just to show you where I'm coming from, a lot of the, I guess, conspiracy theories that come from being skeptical of science itself has to do with the lack of knowledge of the science itself. So I'm willing to admit if I'm wrong, but 2 years ago, I would have said there's no way there's any truth to this. They want to control our lives, and they're going to use science to do it. They're going to try to affect what we purchase. They want to regulate us, tax us, basically a climate tax or a carbon footprint tax has been floated. So I guess you can see where I'm going with that.
Right. More of the social control aspect of the climatology. Right.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, but from my own personal view, I do see a lot of the rhetoric and basically propaganda that has started to come out through the media. Don't get me wrong. I do believe in that. Yes, there is climate change, and we know from numerous sources, from coral, from cores, from coral reefs, from the Greenland ice shelf ice cores, from a myriad of sources, from tree ring data, stuff like that. That yes, the climate is changing, and it has always changed.
Yes,
we've never had a homeostasis in the atmosphere. Or in our climate. It's always been changing. It always has changed. But I think what the hyperbole is that it's changing so rapidly. I think that's a big part of it.
Well, one thing I forgot to mention, to acknowledge actually, is the massive deforestation that is happening in the places like the Amazon, other places where there used to be just tons of trees, and now they're gone. There does seem to be some research that shows that mass deforestation does affect climate, also jet streams. I don't have all the terminology, but I am willing to accept that, yes, this mass deforestation is corporate greed, and it does have negative effects. Plus all the trash we're dumping into waterways, oceans, lakes, rivers, streams, and whatnot. And also chemicals. I mean, don't get me started on that. So,
we touched on a bit of that with the chlorofluorocarbons. So, part of that, I mean, the deforestation, that is a part of it, but also what people also don't realize is that a lot of the climate is affected, especially the so-called, the greenhouse effect. It's not really the carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide, but it's methane. Methane is anywhere from 8 to 10 times more powerful of a greenhouse effect gas than carbon. And the largest source of methane and carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide is the ocean. That's number one. The oceans put out a huge amount of this stuff. Number two is decaying biomatter. And the largest generator of that decaying biomatter that generates this huge amounts of methane, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide is the rainforest. So they contribute to it, but at the same time, they also absorb a lot of it. There's a bit of a homeostasis there to where things kind of level out. With the amount of carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and methane that are generated from this decaying matter that
Right.
is coming out of it, but it's also absorbing it at almost the same rate. There's a little bit of a difference, but not much. But what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of this stuff is coming from the oceans, and the oceans are also a huge thermal regulator. We have these deep undersea currents. That's why we have El Nino and La Nina, these periodic cooling and warming cycles that happen in the north and in all of the major oceans of the world. So that's also a major thermal regulator of the planet, and of course it radiates off into the atmosphere before it's then radiated off into space. So that's why we have different weather patterns.
Could I just ask real quickly, where do you fall on the spectrum of climate change? Do you see it as mostly caused by nature, or do you see mankind or people actually contributing the most? Because I know you mentioned the oceans, which I've heard that argument before, and other factors. So do you see nature as the biggest contributing factor to climate change?
I would say that nature is the number one regulating factor of the climate. We're talking a huge amount. I mean, it's the whole planet basically. However, I do believe that we can affect it, and we have been affecting it. I personally have a theory that we have been affecting it ever since the advent of the Industrial Revolution and the introduction of coal and the widespread use of coal, and then later hydrocarbons in the beginning of the 20th century with the use of fossil fuels such as oil. I think that we have been contributing to it. We may be speeding it up a little bit, and we can contribute to it and affect it, but not to the extent that a lot of the media is portraying it as. They're almost solely blaming it on us, and I don't believe that's the case. I think it's a contributing factor, but I believe that the majority of the planet is what's responsible for regulating the climate.
Well, right, and I agree with that, because, like I brought up earlier, there are a lot of factors with our environment that are completely beyond our control. Like I brought up the ice age. We're coming off of an ice age, and seeing tons of glacial melt off throughout the entire world, we're seeing major effects of that, like when there used to, for example, when humans first crossed over into the Americas, they were able to do that because of the land bridge. Now, but because the ice age our ice ages, we're warming up, and we've been warming up steadily for thousands of years. The land bridge was completely overwhelmed with the sea.
Well, could I ask a question? As far as the scientists that are advocating man-made global warming, obviously it goes beyond the media hyperbole. There are actual scientists out there that are saying, yes, we are causing it. So basically, you don't accept that, or?
No, I accept that we're contributing to it. I think what we are doing is that we are just speeding it up. We are exacerbating it. Okay, we're not the sole cause, and we're not what we've done is we've changed the rate of temperature increase. It's not that we have done it, solely by our own, and it's because we've gotten into heavy industry and agriculture and deforestation, as you mentioned, and other factors that, yes, they are contributing to it, and we may be speeding it up a bit. But I think that it would be less than probably 5%. I don't think that it's, something like that. And the good doctor, the doctor that was on, he made some great points about volcanology affecting it as well. The sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, all the different chemicals, all the different gases that are spewed out by, the hundreds of millions of tons in some of these eruptions. We're just coming out of a mini ice age, which occurred because of an eruption of Krakatoa in the South Pacific in the 18th century.
Yeah.
Massive, massive volcano blew. I mean, this thing is huge.
And we
Huge.
saw another short one in the Americas after the eruption of Mount St. Helens, which was enormous.
Right. And well, not only that, but he also mentions the most recent ones in Iceland.
Right. Yeah.
Explosions, things like that. And we also do have data that goes all the way back to the last explosion, the last eruption of Yellowstone, and also another one that was the last eruption in Russia, which was also another super volcano, which also had an explosive volcanic event. So I think there is a lot of data that does show and does go to back up his claims that yes, volcanology does have a huge amount to do with it. The thing that I wasn't too sure about, and I was glad that he was able to clarify it, was about the lava flows, whether it was a basaltic lava flow or an energetic explosion, and how the two different types affect our climate differently. I think that was a big factor. I wasn't too sure on that, and he was able to he was able to clarify that a bit for me. So
What
that
did you end up saying on that? 'Cause, I missed quite a few parts of it. So
okay, right. Well, basically the basaltic lava flows tend to lead to global warming, whereas the explosive eruptions of volcanoes tend to lead to global cooling. So
okay.
yeah, and there's good reasons, because like an explosive volcanic event, to where a volcano like Mount St. Helens blows and throws huge amounts of sulfur dioxide, um, carbon monoxide, and ash particles into the air, changes the amount of ultraviolet radiation that penetrates the atmosphere, because the microparticle ash up in the atmosphere reflects the sunlight back out. So you don't get as much UV penetration. Whereas with a basaltic lava flow, you don't have that ash that's put up there. You don't have as much sulfur dioxide, but you have dioxins and other things, which actually lead to more of it being trapped by the atmosphere, more of the heat.
Right. So, and in terms of the lava flows, we're having a lot of that activity as well. I mean, Hawaii.
Ooh. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, okay, so if we're only contributing to 5%, let's just be generous and say 8%, that really isn't a whole lot. Even if percent, that doesn't seem to be the end all be all.
Well, I mean, but even if we're only contributing 5%, 5% is still highly noticeable.
It's like a drop in the bucket.
Well, it's a drop in the bucket, but that 5% accelerates the natural process that's already been going on. So if you accelerate by 5%, that's actually quite, something quite remarkable in a system that is this huge. I mean, think about the size of our atmosphere and the thermal regulation that goes on. It's a huge amount, and 5% of that is extreme. I mean, that's a huge amount. I mean, we're talking what, 1.3 to 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's a huge temperature.
Yeah. I mean, just think about the human body, and how fragile that is for temperature. Like, if we go just a few degrees above our normal state, we become feverish, and it can be detrimental to our body. And if you hit above 104, it can kill you.
And that's almost 5%.
Yeah.
I mean, a normal human body temperature should be about 98 degrees. So 5%, well, we're at about 103, and then anything past 103 or 104 is considered life-threatening. Failure, things like that. So
brain damage and all that.
Microscopic scale. I mean, we're talking on the on a microscopic scale. We're talking macroscopic scale. We're talking huge. We're talking, billions of joules of energy that are being pumped in, that are changing on our planet. So it's a huge amount.
Yeah. I like looking at it. I always like looking at it in terms of different animals and stuff, because it shows just how fragile our ecosystems are on Earth.
I
Just a
wouldn't
few
say- I
degrees and
wouldn't
you
say-
can wreck anything.
Right. I wouldn't say fragile. I would say sensitive.
Yeah.
I love that line from George Carlin is, people are saying, oh, save the planet, save the planet. No, it's save the humans. The planet will be fine. It's the people that are fucked. Okay. It's the
Right.
life on the planet that's going to be affected. The planet's going to be fine. It'll be here long after we're long dead. Okay.
I love that
The only thing
line.
that's not going to really care that much is going to be bacteria because that stuff evolves so quickly, but everything else is fucked.
Well, not only that, but we also have extremophiles. We have
Yes.
bacteria that live in hydrogen sulfide, which friggin' kills everything else. We have stuff that lives in. I mean, I was just in Yellowstone this last June, and looking into some of these geysers and some of these pools, and realizing that that water is at 160 degrees Fahrenheit, but yet the coloration is some of the bacteria that live in there. So even then, there are extremophiles that can still survive something like that.
Yeah,
So,
or motherfucking tardigrades.
yeah, tardigrades they can survive outer space, for fuck's sake. I mean, they can survive damn near anything. They're amazing. But it's still, we're having an effect, but I don't think that it's the level of effect that a lot of people have been conditioned and propagandized into believing from the media and from social culture. I think that is a big part of what has been going on in the past 20 years.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about that?
No, I agree with it. Like
I
we're
was gonna
definitely
say,
having
thank you.
we are having a much smaller effect than
Turn
people
the
are
glass,
actually making it
yes.
out to be. Now that small effect is, still, as we've explained, very problematic. But it's not the full blown we're the cause of everything that's going to end the world. It like the media just gets off on hyperbole.
Well, it's a business. That's how they make their money. Is hyperbole. It's Brian, were you going to say something? Hello, Brian. I guess he froze up. Okay, Brian. Okay, he's not there. So I'm just seeing if someone in the live chat, he says he's got a lot of stuff on this, wants to join us.
We have Keith Richards, apparently, according to Sweet Heathen.
Okay, there's a lot of drugs. Oh, there he is. He's back. Okay, Brian. Brian, were you going to say something just before you seized up there?
Yeah, I was going to say we need to switch to biodegradable plastics post haste.
Yeah, that we could do that, and that's now they can be made from corn oil and are biodegradable. I have no problem with that. That speaks to part of what I wanted to get to as well. Is how do we? I mean, it is something that is happening. It's something that's always happened, but how do we go about addressing the issue in a serious manner that is not going to be detrimental to the world economy or to local economies, things like that?
Yeah. Well, here's the first one. Not leaving the Paris Agreement.
That was stupid. Yeah, the Paris Accord. That was retarded. That was a bad move. So
on my throat there.
Yep. I'm gonna let's see. Scene G says he wants to join. So, Scene, go ahead and email me at my Gmail. Sean, email me at my Colorado Biker Prepper at gmail.com and send me an email, and I will reply with the link. So, and that goes for other people in the chat. If you do want to join us, please feel free to do so. Just go ahead and send me a message at my Gmail address, and I got it pulled up right now. I'm refreshing it. So if you want to join us, I will let you guys in. Please understand, though, that I am a lot like Steve and Kyle, is that I do not tolerate people talking over one another. And if you are being a dick, I'll boot you. Okay, you're gone. I do not tolerate that. This should be a discussion, not a dumpster fire scream fest. Okay. So we can have a good heated discussion, but it shouldn't be over something. We should keep it sensible. That's my whole thing. I
But
like
I was wanting to yell and dumpster fire.
Yeah.
well,
Are
these
you going to
dumpster
be?
fires are fun sometimes, especially the medical waste
Yeah.
dumpster fires occasionally. But but those are usually things like G-Man or Ken Ham or the real
No,
guys
not
way out.
G-Man. Not G-Man.
Oh, I
Dude,
know.
I'm having PTSD now.
Oh, I know. I
Hey,
have
hey, Colorado
permanent.
biker.
But yeah,
Can I ask you? Yeah. Are you going to be doing? Are you going to be on the non-sex show for your own presentation?
yeah, we'll be doing that in early December. We will be doing one on preparedness, on the whole prepper thing. I've got a couple
Okay.
of my prepper friends that are lined up.
Nice.
Kyle originally wanted me to get some of the real out there nutcases, that just the wackos, the extreme religious ones, the doomsday prepper, as it was put. But they
Oh,
just come
listen.
on.
I
They won't
used to
come on.
have a I used to have a book that actually talked about the importance of having your own bomb shelter for back in the 70s and 80s,
Yeah.
during the Cold War. Oh my God. I
Yeah,
mean, the
there's a lot of
diagrams.
hyperbole and rhetoric and stuff that goes along with that whole genre. I'm a very mellow one. I've got a couple of
Ah,
my buddies that are no, I got a couple of my buddies that are a little bit more into it than I am. So, but I just want to put some sensibility to it, but also put our position forward in a way that makes more sense. But that's
yeah.
not tonight's topic. So
Yeah, Brian.
All
I
right.
have
I'm arranging it with Kyle and Steve, and that will probably be either the first or second week of December because I'm going to the UK for a motorcycle show for a month. So
Awesome.
I'll be back in early December. So
Dude, that's so cool. I'd love to go to the UK. I
it,
I
it's
go
an
to the
interesting place.
castles and I want to go to Oxford University and stuff, but
Oh, I've been there. I actually prefer the town of Cambridge. Cambridge is a lot better. If you're going to go to a university there in a university town, I would highly recommend going to Cambridge. It's a
I
lot.
know that's what everyone tells me, but at the same time, I mean, so if you look at that shelf right there,
Yeah.
that's all Tolkien.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I'm a big Tolkien fan myself too. So
So
I've
I'm
already
like,
been there. I've been there. I've been like, Yahoo!
yeah,
So
I'm like, Oxford biased by default. So
right. Yeah. So, well, I was big into the DNA stuff, and of course, the two guys that actually were the first to come up with the double helix.
yeah,
I forget their names, but they were professors at Cambridge, and we actually went to the pub, and I actually found out where they were sitting when they came up with the idea in the pub. And I had to go sit in that booth in that corner of the snug. I was just like, no, I got to be in the same place as these guys. So anyway, Watson and Crick. Thank you, Steve. Yes, it was Watson and Crick. And part of it was they came up with part of it, the double helix, while they were at a pub just off campus. So anyway, and Sean, hey, Sean G, how you doing? Welcome to the chat.
How you doing? Thanks for having me on.
You had in your you put in the live chat that you had some research on this. Tell us a little bit about your position on climate change and what's going on.
I kind of come from both sides where I think it has a lot to do with nature, just the way the world works, the cycles.
Mhm.
But over the past 20 years, 10, 15, 20 years, I think man's actually industry, to be specific about it, has exacerbated. I mean, just blown it up to make it more. The majority of it, in my opinion, be human being at fault of it, admitting more than even nature could.
Okay. Why do you believe that? What industries or what do you think caused? Why do you think that we are now the predominant force for climate change?
Through, well, a lot of the solutions that they're giving off, that they're saying they want to do, they're doing, and it actually produces more of these gases
Okay,
than,
let's slow down here. What solutions?
for instance, ocean fertilization.
Okay.
We know the act of dumping. They're dumping iron into the
Yeah,
ocean
iron,
for the
nitrite,
blooms.
phosphorus.
Yes. Obviously for the algae blooms, and then I think you had actually said something about it already. But the problem is that to capture enough of this stuff, they're producing more CO2, and all these other gases.
Capture enough what?
Say again?
To capture what? Capturing what?
Okay, so one of the big things that they're doing now is the carbon capturing and storage.
Okay, carbon sequestration. Okay, gotcha.
And the biggest issue with that is that they still haven't figured out a solution to bring down the amount of CO2 they produce to actually capture it. So they're capturing, they're putting out these big numbers, millions of tons, but they're not putting out the numbers of how much they're actually emitting to do it.
Okay.
And also the dangers of doing it.
Right. The excess methane from when the organisms die off, things like that.
Yeah.
The amount of carbon that's actually scooped up, the amount of other chemicals that are being utilized by these microorganisms, the algae, the photoplankton, the phytoplankton, things like that, right?
100%. Yeah. And then what the thing that the underlying thing that they're not telling everyone about is the fact that their majority of the capturing they're doing isn't to store it. It's actually to recover more oil, which obviously goes, they sell it, and eventually that produces more gases anyway. So
Okay. That I don't see the correlation with, because it takes hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years for natural gas and for oil deposits to form.
okay, so what they're doing, what the new thing is with this capture and sequestration. I hate that word.
Sequestration.
Yes. Is the oil companies, it's a huge business for them now. They're putting these scrubbers on their factories and basically using the CO2 compressed and liquefied, injecting it into their wells, and it actually they're able to recover 60 to 80% more oil out of the wells from it.
Right. Yeah, they're pressurizing the wells with the captured carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
Carbon dioxide. Right. That's part of the whole. That's also part of. It's a different form of fracking, basically.
I call it reverse fracking.
Right. Hydrofracture, or not hydrofracture, but to pneumatically fracture the rock, pull more of that out. Right. So that's part of it. Well, what other contributing factors do you think that we have been adding to, other than oceanic seeding? What other stuff?
Well, I think that one of the biggest ones that I would say we need to worry about is the blanketing that they want to do, solar blanketing they want to do, because in their plans to do it, they're basically the only thing they've actually really stated as a plan would be to spray endless amounts of sulfur into the stratosphere until the Earth started cooling down, which in itself is a bad idea.
Okay. That's one thing that I'm extremely dubious about as well. Also, because, and this is also because I'm also a skeptic, and I hate woo. And one of the biggest woo things that I've seen, in the past, 15, 20 years over the internet, is this chemtrail crap. Yes. And the problem with the chemtrail, and also with the atmospheric seeding that they're talking about, is people don't realize the vast amounts of anything that we would have to put into the atmosphere to have an effect. We're talking, trillions of tons of stuff to put up there. It's not feasible. We would have to have fleets of aircraft spraying shit 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and doing it all the time.
Well, that's part of. I'm
it's
sorry.
not feasible.
Well, one of their plan. That's part of the plan with the sulfur. Is they've gotten everything down to the exact plane they would use, which will, I forget the name of the exact plane. I'd have to go back under my computer, but it holds 160. It would hold 160 gallons of the sulfur stuff. They would have to do what they said. I think it was 20 to 30 missions per day, nonstop until it cooled, and they wouldn't be able to stop. Because if they stopped, then all they would really be doing is giving us the effects of the sulfur as
right. But it's still to have an effect on a system that large. And but you've got water vapor interference, you've got the solar radiation interference with it, which is going to break down the molecules. There's just so much that it's completely unfeasible. It's untenable. There's really no way I could see anything like that having an effect on a system that large.
Well, they're saying 7 years of constant spraying, basically.
I still don't see it. They would have to have hundreds of thousands of aircrafts doing this constantly to have, to be able to maintain it, let alone to have a market change.
So
100% right.
I'd find Trump's idea for Space Force to be more tenable than that.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, that's actually within reason. We have the science and the technology right now. I mean, look at SpaceX and the other private companies that are getting into space now. We could do that. That's a stupid ass idea, unless we're expecting an alien invasion, sometime in the next, decade or something. But
It's really pointless because
yeah, it's a waste of resources.
Well, they've also, I mean, they've, I wouldn't call it a space force, but I mean, they've had military in the space industry for
Oh yeah,
40,
the
50
whole Star
years.
Wars thing of the 1980s. I mean,
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan started that. Even back in the Nixon administration, even before that, they were talking about having small missiles on orbiting platforms during the Cold War that would be able to knock out warheads as a defensive system.
Yeah,
we've gone off
it
topic.
was
though.
said that the whole moon race wasn't to see who can get on the moon; it was to see who can put a base on the moon. Basically, Russia or America is
Right. Well, that's
proclaimed. It's not exactly, but it's that's
right.
so
Right.
to speak what
So
it said.
back on topic though. Back on topic. What I mean, okay, Sean. So what human activity do you think has tipped the balance from it being a mostly natural occurrence to a man-made occurrence of climate change? What is the human activity specifically that has caused it to swing from natural causes to man-made cause? What are the different ones that you do?
For me, it's the majority of it is the boost in industry. I think where they're telling us they're playing it down and using more natural forms. I think they're not. I think they're using more fossil fuel. I think they're boosting the economy to use more. The whole solar thing isn't what they're saying. And the main outlining of it is unfortunately is money. They formed whole billions of dollars worth of marketing, the markets based around capturing and all these greenhouse gas solutions.
Okay. I'm a dubious on a few of those. Like, maybe I misunderstood, but how does solar energy do anything but solar energy? How is it using like gas?
No,
Like,
well,
In the manufacturing process of the panels, in the manufacturing of stuff that actually is associated with it, the transportation, the shipment, the setting up. It's one of those reasons why the hybrid Prius car is actually just as much of a nightmare as something as an SUV that gets 12 miles to the gallon.
right.
And not to mention they're selling it as solar, but realistically it's not solar power. It's not at all. It's easing the amount of energy the companies have to produce. That's all that it's really doing. It's not they're not selling any kind of storage of the solar energy. It's
That's the biggest hurdle that we have to come over right now.
100%.
Is alternative energy power storage, because we have plenty. I mean, I've got solar panels myself. I've got it. It's part of that prepper thing, but I've got 800 watts of solar and a small battery bank as a backup system, so that I can heat my house if I get blizzards where I live. I live at almost 10,000 feet in the Rocky Mountains. I get blizzards. I'm stuck at home for a week and don't have power. So I use solar panels to, if I don't have power for a week, no, I have power. I'm the only one in the neighborhood with his lights on. Everybody else is out of power. So the solar is a good way to do it. And this is something that I actually did want to touch on as well.
Solar roads?
What?
Solar roadways?
Oh my God, no. Oh, not Thunderfoot.
I think we need Thunderfoot.
He's entertaining. He's a bit of a prick to everybody, but he's entertaining. So, and his science is actually pretty damn good. I really do like his science.
I love his science. If he talks about anything else other than science, it makes people want to rip my eyes out. But
well, yeah. Stab my.
Video 5 million of solar roadways now.
Yeah, I know. Actually, they're in the Netherlands, and I've seen them. I've been there in Netherlands and Germany. They do have bicycle paths and walkways that are actually solar powered. They actually are institute, but not the solar roadway bullshit that one company was purporting. That was bullshit. So, and he did a good job of debunking that. I love him as a skeptic, as a scientific skeptic. I love him.
Yeah.
But the one thing,
solar roadway, they're also doing it too now.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of places that are starting to switch to that. Now, one thing that I did want to touch on is we are looking at, let's take their worst case scenario, okay? Of yes, we've got catastrophic runaway climate change, okay? Now, what do you think would be the best way of addressing that with alternative energies? What would you guys think?
With alternative energies, I think solar's right now the way to go. I think it's the most efficient of what we got. Around here in Michigan, they like pushing windmill farms.
Those are good. But see, the problem with those are...
windmill farms are one of the worst sources of energy at all. And it's also for upkeep, because you're going to, I mean, you'll spend multi-millions trying to set them up.
Yeah, the main
they're only going to last 2 months before they break down, and you have to keep repairing them.
Yeah, right. but you touched on solar. That is still the huge issue. The storage of solar.
Right. Yeah.
I live in California, and we have the largest solar farms, but yet they're not really those in themselves aren't solar. They're solar generated, but they're realistically run on fossil fuels as well.
What about water power?
Are you talking about tidal?
Yes.
Tidal
yes.
or dams, hydroelectric.
Yeah.
Well, that's good for everywhere along, a river or the ocean. But I mean, there are billions and billions of people that wouldn't be able to.
Right. Now, see, this is one thing that I would have loved to have asked the good doctor that was here. And it's because he was a geophysicist, and that is because I've been to Iceland numerous times. I actually take Iceland Air on the way to and from the UK a lot. Okay, because you fly Iceland Air, you can have a free stopover of up to like a week and a half. They do that to encourage tourism, and I've been there. And the one that I saw that looked really good, and from the research that I've done, is geothermal. Because we have enough energy and geothermal energy in the world to supply us with continuous growth rate for the 250,000 years. I don't know.
And it takes less. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say it takes far less emissions to do it too.
Right. Right. Yeah. All you'd have to do basically is set up the geothermal power plant and then run it, and then it's a minimal maintenance cost for the amount of continued energy output. So compared to the amount of energy input or output compared to the input, you get a hell of a lot more out of geothermal than you do out of solar, out of wind, out of tidal, out of geothermal.
Oh yeah.
I don't know why. I mean, everybody's all about solar, and I think part of that is because the solar to produce the panels and everything is becoming a huge industry, and I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. Have you heard about the space-based solar energy that they're talking about?
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. About transmitting the energy back down to the planet using microwaves or laser microwaves or stuff like that. Yeah, I've heard about that as well.
Yeah, because California sold their energy rights. PG&E sold their energy rights, I believe, about 12 years ago to Solarian, who is supposed to be, I guess, head of that construction. The plan I've been hearing is late this year or next year. They're supposed to be supposedly starting to launch the panels up, but that's just kind of hearsay at the moment. My only concern with that would be the possibility, because they have to transform the solar energy that's generated in orbit into some form of radiation that would have to be transmitted back down to the planet and reconverted again into a usable form. Yeah.
Which right now, the best one that they can come up with would be laser directed microwaves.
Yes.
And the only problem with that is that if something were to happen and they went out of a geosynchronous orbit for some reason, even if it went off by a few millimeters up in orbit. I mean, that's 100 miles up in down on Earth, and all of a sudden you're microwaving an entire suburb of Los Angeles. That would not
Yes.
be good. Everybody
That
gets a
doesn't even
really bad
sound good.
sunburn.
Oh,
Yes,
man.
yes. Not yeah, and just the pure maintenance of it. I've talked to people and they've realized that it'd be constant missions up there to fix little things to make sure it stayed working
Right,
and
to fix
everything.
and
Yep.
just to maintain it, because then
Yeah.
I mean the amount of energy and resources that it takes to put something into orbit is massive. It's a huge investment in money and resources when we can go with geothermal, wind, and solar here on the surface.
Yeah,
See,
like
And you get a better return.
one of my
The-
favorite images was posted by NASA, and I think it was astronaut Kelly, and he's like juggling with kind of with lemons on the International Space Station, and they were like, "Careful!" They're like $4,000 a piece to send up there.
Yeah, they're $4,000 weapons. Yeah.
Well, see, the biggest issue with all the solutions you were saying, because those are all great solutions, the geothermal and everything. The problem is they're not money generators, and that's kind of where I'm sitting, to the point where I don't know. I believe the 12-year thing is from the IPCC. It's kind of more fear porn, if anything.
Yeah, that's sort of the hyperbole I was talking about.
Okay, yeah, and like I said, I think that this whole situation more is about the money and the money generated than solving anything. I don't think they want to solve anything. I think they want to make money. I mean, like I was saying, the whole carbon market, I didn't realize how big it was until I looked into it. Yeah, I mean, cap and trade in itself is a red flag for all of us. We should all be going, why is this even a thing?
Right, but you also have to take into account, I mean, it is a big money thing, but in this world, in the way our social structure is set up, and the way our countries and our nations and everything is set up, everything is controlled by money. Everything is about money. We can't avoid that. And until we go to a resource-based economy, it will be that. And I can see that we could actually make a hell of a lot of money. People could make good money. We could do a lot of jobs if we were to start a program to start getting us off of these, fossil fuels, and to start to move us over to renewable resources. It would create a lot of jobs, and it would be a new industry.
How would you get the oil industry involved in this? I mean,
you can't.
This is a direct.
It already has. It's already happened. Right. It's already happened. The Saudis are already starting to invest billions of dollars in solar and wind and other methods. They can see it ahead of time. They can see that they could produce huge amounts of energy. I mean, they're in the energy business, not just the oil business. Oil was a stepping stone, just like coal was a stepping stone with steam engines and the Industrial Revolution. And that lasted up until the turn of the 20th century. At the turn of the 20th century, oil became much cheaper and much easier than coal. And then that took over as a predominant source of energy. Now we need to move on to other sources because now the technology has developed. We're no longer using steam engines, okay? And the internal combustion engine, it's still a viable, it's still a viable source, but that's what everybody uses. Oil is still, natural gas, oil, it's still used all over the world. But because of the possibility, and I'm not saying it's 100%, that yes, it is the cause, but because of the climactic effects that burning all of this oil is having, even if it is contributing only 5%, it's still something that we now have technology to move past it. And that new way to move, and to move past it into a new energy source could become a new industry in and of itself, which potentially could dwarf the oil industry.
So then
you're right, but you're also counting on our companies to actually have that foresight.
Exactly. So the main thing is we need to stop worrying about how to solve these greenhouse gas emissions, and more try to convince these industries that they don't need to turn this huge profit every year.
Well, I think part of it, I think the majority of the resistance to it is also political, because
Oh yeah.
I don't think it's I don't think it's the energy, because we're talking about some greedy bastards anyway. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, no, look at the coal magnates of the 17th through the 20th century. These guys got massively rich off of coal.
Mm-hmm.
They're in it for the money. They don't give a fuck where it comes from. Okay, they're in it to make money. It's why everybody goes to work every day. We're all in it to make money, because we all got to get by somehow. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and if we can do that, and if they can, what they need to do is look past what they already have. Okay, and they need to look to the future, because there was a guy in the 1970s, I believe his name was Hubble, that worked for one of the major oil companies, and he came up with the peak oil idea, that
Yeah.
there is a finite amount of this resource of oil on the planet, and eventually we're going to run out, and we've got to transition past that. And I think that we're getting to that point.
The problem is that we are so dependent on oil right now. Is that I don't think the companies are going to want to switch over, and also because our companies in general just don't have the foresight to do that. I mean,
Well,
we can look at what foresight they had when we had the outsourcing problem back in the early 2000s, and just how detrimental that ended up being for HP and GM. We all saw it coming, but they didn't care. They didn't have the foresight, and it ended up bankrupting GM.
Hey guys, actually I got to take off, but I definitely appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, Sean, thank you for coming on. It was good to have your input. Appreciate it.
You guys have a good night.
All right, thanks. We'll see you later. So, Brian, you got something to add? I saw you laughing there for a minute.
As far as the foresight of companies, I don't know so much if it's foresight or the having the capital to do that.
Well, they got the capital.
You're talking about multinational, international companies, though.
Yeah.
But I'm more focused on not mom and pop shops, but I'm talking about companies that employ 400 or 500 people that are not multinational. That, I don't know. I mean, what are we talking about? What would we say? Excuse me. What would we say is the price? What would you put a price on as far as how much it would cost to convert to some of these technology, or to these
billions.
alternative
Trillions, not billions. It would be in the trillions, because the amount, I think one of the major problems that we would have transitioning from an oil-based hydrocarbon economy would be one to a renewable resource-based economy, because the amount of infrastructure that would need to be changed. I mean, no more gas stations. They'd all be like a Tesla charging station, because we'd have to move the manufacturing over to electric. We'd have to move all this other stuff over to electric. There would have to be a massive investment in infrastructure, not just in the actual energy generation itself, but also in the delivery of that energy, in the infrastructure that surrounds it, the support systems that surround it, the manufacturing of it. It would be a huge swap over. I mean, it'd be something that would make the Apollo program, look like a kit car, a model car that you put together. It's just, it would be huge.
So basically, we're talking about the cost alone would be devastating.
I wouldn't say devastating.
Say it again.
I would not say devastating. I would say that it would be something it would have to be generational change, something that would take place over 50 plus years. We have, and I think that, if we were to do a change like that, that it would create these new industries. It's already starting to do it now. It's creating these industries that would employ people, that would add to the economy to an extent that it would create some value, that when you transition from the oil industry, it would be a massive retraining of everybody in the oil industry and oil exploration and extraction and refining and delivery and all that. Then those people would have to be retrained to do it as whether it's wind, solar, geothermal, tidal, hydroelectric, whatever. but we would need to, it would be some, but it would take it's going to take a generation to do that change. I think that's one of the reasons why there's not the corporate or political will to do it, is because they really don't see long term. They see short term, quarter and annual profits. They don't see in the long term.
Correct. Well, I mean, even if they could, yeah, I guess I could go either way. I get it.
Yeah, the other big thing, the thing that's, in my opinion, going to actually be the most expensive is the infrastructure. Because so how we can just talk about how expensive it was to do the interstate highway system and set up the infrastructure for cars to be able to go through all that, right? That was massive. Let's talk about reorganizing it all for electric cars, right? We don't have the stations, we don't have any of the recharging outlets, nothing of that for the electric cars right now.
Well, we're slowly developing it. There's more and more
slowly,
stations, but yeah, not scale that we need.
Yeah, that's where I think that the vast majority of the price, the priciness of all this is going to actually come up is in the infrastructure, because that is what you have to have before you can actually implement the rest of your plans.
Right. Now, the other question would be, and this goes back to the climate issue, is how would us swapping over to these different energy sources, we have no way of knowing. We won't know until we do it, until probably another generation after we were to do a swap over like this. What kind of climate effect would it actually have? Would all the excess manufacturing, the change in the way we collect and distribute energy, what climate effects would that have? That's one question that I'm wondering.
Right. And there's right now no way to tell. Like collecting geothermal energy, I mean, the only country that actually powers itself almost solely on that is Iceland.
Right.
So there's no way to really tell what environmental effects it really has, because it's one of the tiniest countries out there.
Yeah, believe me, the whole population of the island is like 300,000. I've been there.
580,000, I think it is right now. But my brother spent, I think it was 12 or 16 days down there, and going through that, he can speak Icelandic and stuff, so he just wanted to go down there and have fun.
Well, if you ever go to the Penis Museum.
They did. I've been thinking of doing it, but I mean, what I really want to get are just apparently in the gift shop there, they have like flipping the bird with a dick on sticks, and I just want to get those and then attach them to the sides of my car.
Okay, I would love that. I would love that. Yes, Brian, I heard you go. What? Yes, in Reykjavik, there is a penis museum. Oh, and it's all about the mammalian penis.
I'll send you some photos.
It's a bunch of jars with dicks in them. It's a weird place. It really is. Yeah. But every kind of animal in the world is weird.
I was gonna say I would prefer a Bob's and Vagine museum myself, but
yeah, well, I would too. But Kyle would be in heaven. He'd be like, "Oh, I love."
I'm pan, so
Oh, you'd have fun too. Yeah, you'd have fun too. But anyway, I mean, we really don't know what kind of effect swapping over to all of these alternative energy sources or renewable energy sources would have. Right. Would there be? That's one thing I wanted to ask the doctor about, is if we were to go to geothermal on a massive scale. I mean, would that have an effect on plate tectonics? Would that have effect on volcanology? That's albeit in the short term or the long term.
Right.
That's one thing that we can't predict. So, but then also, the one in Iceland, it uses oil and steam. So if we're suddenly pumping out, all this steam into the atmosphere from the generation process, how is that going to affect our atmosphere? How is that going to change the climate? So there's still a lot of stuff that we have to figure out. So
yeah, no, there's right now the biggest problem we have is not enough research and having enough foresight into all this yet. That
Yeah.
both from a company aspect, companies not wanting to switch over to it, and then also scientifically, we just don't have enough research yet, I think, especially when it comes to all these alternative energies and the effects they're going to have. And I don't think we can for a while because we haven't been able to see, we've only been using them for a short time.
Right, since what, the late 1960s at the earliest.
At the earliest, and
Yeah.
no widespread use until probably the late 80s. Like,
And even then, it's still the cost of like solar and stuff like that. It was prohibitively expensive to
yeah,
set and maintain. So it's only in the past, I would say, 10 years that solar has actually, the prices come down enough to actually make it viable for the average person to do, or for larger companies, even moderate companies to do.
so what's your? Well, I'm interested in what your guys' opinion of nuclear energy is.
Oh, we need Steve in here for that. He's the expert when it comes to nuclear.
Or we, well, and actually, one that would be also good to get, ironically, would be Thunderfoot, because that's
Yeah.
what
Oh,
he used to work
yes.
doing.
I would love to have Thunderfoot on this show. I would love to see a show like that.
Yeah, that would be good. Steve, if you're listening, we need to get Thunderfoot on. So
I mean, just the science. I mean, forget politics. Just on the science alone, that guy is. I got to say, he's got some awesome content.
yeah, he does. I do love his stuff. I really do. He's a great scientist skeptic. I do like that. So that's something that I actually kind of wanted to touch on too. Is, that's part of the scientific method, is skepticism and debate, and going over established scientific theory and challenging it. That's critical to the scientific method. And I think that's part of what the good doctor tonight was talking about too. I don't think he directly stated it, but I think that's what he was getting to was, look, we need to get past, the consensus, as he put it, and I would put it the same way. Is that, hey, we need to challenge this. We don't need to just settle on it for now. We need to keep investigating. And I think he's right. I think
Yes.
it's gotten to the point, and I ascribe a lot of this to the media culture and social culture, is that a lot of people have become less skeptical, or they don't debate as much. Things have become much more polarized, much more, it's black or it's white, Republican or Democrat, whatever, conservative, liberal, whatever. And I believe he's right that has stifled debate. It's stifled debate and dialogue, and I think it's carried over into a lot of the scientific community as well, as part of a social culture.
It's about it's about extremism now. It's about
Right.
who's loud and who makes a big noise. It's not about who is actually right.
Right. And I mean, I think that's one thing that, they didn't touch on enough in the last chat. And I think it should have had a bit more discussion. I know, but they were also limited on time too.
Yeah.
So
Honestly, I mean, the topic we're going over, I mean, this is like the topic of entire dissertations and thousands upon thousands of journal articles and papers. Like, it's just not something you can handle in a 2-hour discussion, really. But it's still a discussion that everyone needs to be having, and people need to also learn that one thing that I kind of despise is the way that we throw around authority as if it's always right in some way, and we don't challenge it as much as we should anymore.
they're touting around the logical fallacy of, argument from authority.
Right. And like you cite using authorities as a citation and trying to use them to and using them to back an argument when they have a bunch of research behind them, that's fine. But then saying that they're automatically right because they're an authority.
Right. And well, it's not only that. Now I've studied journalism. I have a degree in journalism. My specialty in journalism was methodology and ethics. and watching how they, so I have a bit more insight into how the message is disseminated to the public. And they've created this false dichotomy, this black and white, this, A or B. And I think that's really, really starting to stifle things.
It is.
And I think that it's becoming so culturally pervasive that it's really starting to affect science and a lot of other things too. I think we're starting to have a problem with that. And
Yeah. Well,
there's a big
and instead of it being about having the debate, having the discussion, and actually trying to learn something, it's been about I'm right, you're wrong.
yeah,
Which
exactly.
is
Instead of hey, we need to
instantly
discuss
the worst mindset you can have going into anything, and that's why the creationist evolution debate is still even going on, because people are just going into it automatically. I'm right, you're wrong, and nothing's going to change my mind.
right, a false dichotomy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to also ask out in the chat, is there anybody out there in the live chat? Do we have any climate deniers? Is there anyone in there that does not believe in climate change? And if there are, let me know. Put it in the live chat, because I'd like to get you on the panel and get your evidence. I'd like to hear what you have to say about it.
I used to be an extreme denialist.
Okay, why?
Because of the information that I had. Like I told you when I mentioned ClimateGate, and
Yeah.
So there was a lot of things a lot of anomalies that were pointed out, but I didn't have the full picture. All I knew is they want to control us, they want our money, and they're going to use anything they can to get at it, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Right now, I'm kind of in the middle.
Right.
I'm seriously considering the arguments, and I want it to be informed, not just emotive or based on emotion and conspiracy, but I want it to be logical and I want it to be informed. That's
more reasonable.
That's where I'm at. Yes.
Hey,
yes.
Just a sec. I'll be right back. I'm gonna black out here for a second, though.
Okay. VTemp, out in the live chat, he says, "Sorry, fellas, but we're doomed. I give humanity until 2035." And I see
come
this,
on.
yeah, I know, and I see this as part of the hyperbole and rhetoric.
Are you sure that's not Al Gore?
I
think he's
it might be Al
creeping
Gore
us.
in disguise. It's one of Al Gore's sock accounts.
I guess.
VTemp, would you like to come in and give us your reasoning and your logic behind why we only have until 2035? I'd like to hear that. No, seriously, I'd like to hear, because I think that there's two sides to this. I think that there's the one side to where you have just straight up climate change denial from some people. And then there are also the opposite, the false dichotomy, the total opposite extreme of the spectrum, where we have people that are saying, we're doomed. It's, we'll all be dead by 2050 because the climate is going to, the temperature is going to go up by 8 degrees Celsius and we're all going to cook like bacon. I'd like to see,
Yeah, I thought he was just joking about that. If he's serious, then I apologize.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too. Yeah, it might be sarcasm. I don't know, but we'll find out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, VTemp, if you want to come in, let me know, and we have you on the panel. So
come on in. The water's
yep.
fine.
Anybody else in the chat too, if you'd like to, or in the live chat, let me know. You can. Oh, wait a minute. I got a message in my inbox.
Yay!
Inbox. Let's see if someone wants to join. And let's see. Oh no, that's from one of the preppers about the show next month. So nope. Damn it. Oh well. No, not damn it to him. He's a great guy, really cool. Yeah. Just no, I thought it was someone for this. So
we just don't want to hear from him right now.
Well, that's not the subject right now. That's just
I know.
the subject. So
well,
I like to try and I'm doing a pretty good job, but I like to try and keep us focused on the subject at hand.
What about this idea of us adapting to our environment? Now, I'm referencing an article I read about a species of aquatic life that were found in a volcano living and thriving in boiling hot water. Species of shark, species of eel, species of this and that. Okay, now, I don't know how long it took for them to adapt to their environment, but as far as the temperature rising and all that, do you think mankind could adapt fast enough at the current rate of change that we observe now?
It's possible. I think it might be possible. We might suffer in the interim, but you have to admit that we are probably one of the most adaptable species on the planet, other than, you know, microorganisms like bacteria or viruses.
I mean, to be fair to that, though, I think the primary reason for our adaptability is actually our technology and our propensity for breeding, not because we're actually adaptive.
I think it's also due to our intelligence. I think that we have the ability to think our way out of a problem, you know, to innovate, you know, like, green clothing,
Right.
you know, it's cold out. Okay, let's kill that animal and put its skin on me, you know. I'm cold, let's kill that animal and wear their fur.
But that's not actually adapting. That's just using well,
it is adapting in a social or in a different way. It's you're talking about the physical adaptation. You're talking about the evolutionary adaptation. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I still think that it might be possible, but it might be possible, but I doubt it. In the time frame of, say, one generation, it would take multiple generations for the allele frequencies to change. I mean, evolution is not a. I mean, it can work on a microscopic scale, but it's not going to have, you know, it's going to be in the macroscope, you know, in the macroscope that it actually does happen.
Right. And the thing with evolution is it only works as fast as you breed, and humans are not the most fast breeders in the world.
Right. Well,
right now
we're actually, if you're Mormon or not. Depends if you're Mormon or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right now, I mean, I think they've been estimating that we're actually going to be seeing a decrease in the rate of birth.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I could go Amish if need be.
Okay. I would go more towards Heterite or Mennonite because I like electricity.
Honestly, I just have fantasies basically every day about just deciding to go out in the wild, Amish, start my own little cult, and we'll just build our own little society out somewhere. And
the cult of Christopher, the future,
the cult of Christopher. Yeah.
It gets really good because I've invented the religion. I've invented languages for it, and
he's not wrong. He's not wrong.
9 yards, like.
I think a lot of people have that same kind of fantasy as they just, and I kind of have one too. And it goes to a lot of preppers too, is that they just want to check out of the current society that we have because they just see the inherent flaws in it and just want to go off on their own and do their own thing.
Well, and my problem is that, so I do actually fall on the cynic side. I think we're going to last past the 2030s. I think we're probably going to last. I think we've got a decent chance at lasting beyond this millennia. But
yeah, I do too.
But the one thing I don't see is us being highly successful past probably the next 200 years, and that's just because I don't think that humanity is going to get its shit together.
Well, what about space stations? I mean, we're already talking about.
Oh, no, the whole let's build colonies out in space or send people to space stations and shit. It's unfeasible.
Damn it.
Because you have to send all the resources up there. You've got to make sure that you have that everyone is consistently being taken care of until you can actually build the infrastructure in those other places for everything. And I just don't see it at all to do.
Yeah, not at least for, I would say, another 150 years. It's going to be 3 generations.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, it is possible. I mean, it is possible. I mean, Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson, and also even the guy in the wheelchair. Duh.
Stephen Hawking.
Stephen Hawking.
Stephen
Yep.
Hawking. He said, all of them have said that, yes, we could do this. We could develop the technology to, go exoplanet. And I think that eventually we will, and we may have to.
Right.
Yeah, but the problem we have is that in order to do it, like if we wanted to do Mars, which is basically the next,
that's a nightmare.
basically the only thing that we could possibly do that would be the most habitable thing closest to Earth.
Right.
If we were wanting to terraform Mars, they're saying it would. Current estimates are that it'd take close to 1,000 years to actually do it.
Well, just enough to generate an atmosphere that would be habitable would take anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 years.
Right. So that means basically the only viable thing to do would be biodomes.
Yeah, biohabitats. And even then,
those take tens to generations long to actually get stable in any way, shape, or form. And from the experiments that we've done with biodomes in the past, is we know they don't work so well.
Well, Pauly Shore. Oh my God, that was a horrible film.
I want to go to Dune. I don't know about y'all, but I want to go to Dune.
Well, we're gonna have to get a lot of spice and learn how to bend space.
Spice, I'm telling
you. The funny thing is that I've just been thinking about it. I'm like, that is a really interesting idea, folding space. Like,
well, that's the only way that actual interplanet or interstellar or intrasolar or intergalactic travel would even be possible, just because of the distances involved.
Yeah, well, I did
space. I mean, that's the whole concept behind the warp engine from Star Trek.
Yeah,
folding space.
The warp engine from
it's taking I think time and then choosing your reentry point. But yeah, similar.
Yeah, and it has to do with moving space around.
Exactly, that's what I mean. Is literally removing yourself from space time.
Yeah,
and reappearing somewhere else.
Right. Where with Dune, it actually has to do with
zooming through space. Right. Okay, well, back on topic. Some people in the live chat, Arato is your muse. He says Biodome makes me think of Pauly Shore. Yeah, party on. Okay, Pauly Shore, the weasel. Anyway, some of the things that the people have put in there is also a bit about methane hydrate or hydride. And also the methane trapped in permafrost. Now, that is something that I also wanted to address, is if they are correct about this, about climate change, about the planet gradually warming or even rapidly warming, do you guys think that it's going to accelerate even more certain things like that start to happen? Because some of the people in the chat are correct. There's huge amounts of methane hydrate that is just off the eastern coast of the United States. And it's basically methane that's under pressure and so cold at the bottom of the ocean that it's basically crystallized. It first turned into a liquid, and then it's also pressurized it's turned into a crystalline form because of the temperature and low temperatures. This is one of the theories behind the Bermuda Triangle, is actually huge parts of that cutting loose and then methane going up and sinking ships. But anyway, what do you guys think about that? Do you think it would actually start to accelerate?
I definitely think that there's a possibility. One thing that we need to know, I mean, in order to know for sure, is I think that A, it has to do on the rate of dissipation, and then B, we also have to know how much is even there.
Right.
For sure.
Right.
Without that knowledge, I can't give really an informed opinion on it. If there's enough there and it was all released at once, so there's not, so it's just exerted into the atmosphere like instantly, I definitely think it could have an impact if there's enough of it. But if it's a slow dissipation and so it's going to be absorbed by other stuff, I don't really see it because it'll eventually just be broken apart over time.
Okay. Yeah, I personally, I think that there are certain things that if their predictions are correct and things do start to warm up in the way that they do say, yeah, we have, billions of tons of methane, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide that is locked up in permafrost all around the Arctic Circle and the Antarctic Circle. And certain areas, we also have all this methane hydrate. I think it's hydrate or hydride. I'm trying to remember. And anyway, irregardless, it's I think that there's stuff like that, but I also think that if we have a massive change in the ocean temperatures, we could have mass die-offs of zooplankton, phytoplankton, stuff like that, photoplankton, that could also, all these dying microorganisms. Yeah, sure, a tiny one dies off and it sets off a minuscule amount of carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, methane, all the things that happens when some of these animals die off in the decomposition process. But we're talking just one, but we're talking about billions of tons of them in the ocean. So how is that going to affect it? It's
Yeah.
Yeah, could you break down where this methane is coming from, as far as the
methane hydride?
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's basically generated from all these microorganisms that fall to the sea floor when they die and decompose. It's sedimentary layers that it's basically like chalk. It's like chalk or very fine silt. And as these microorganisms die, like these cocophores and zooplankton, phytoplankton, even other organisms like fish, jellyfish, whatever, any sea life, when it dies, it falls to the sea floor and this slowly gets buried. As it decomposes, it lets off carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, methane, amongst other gases. There's a certain smell, that smell that you get when you pass a dead deer on the side of the road is called cadaverine. And part of that is carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, methane, a few other gases as well, sulfur dioxide, and what's the other one? Hydrogen sulfide, things like that. But these build up in the sediments. And as they slowly make their way and trickle up, because of the super cold temperatures and the high pressure that they're under by being at the bottom of the sea floor, these gases crystallize, or they turn into a liquid and then crystallize into methane hydrate. I got to look it up. Anyway, they turn into methane. They turn into these deposits of methane. And the same thing can be said for the permafrost in the tundra, because you have hundreds of thousands, or tens of thousands of years of growth of very slow growing organisms like peat, sphagnum moss, grasses, trees, stuff like that. And then they die off. And then they don't, and there's such a short growing season for some of this stuff that they die off and then they're buried. Then the next successive generation covers over them. And then as they decompose, they also let off all of these same gases. But because of the cold temperature keeps them from sublimating out into the atmosphere. So they're basically trapped in the permafrost.
Right. And one thing to note with that, like the moss growth, like in Iceland, is they have actual laws set up. So like when Game of Thrones films out there in Iceland and everything, they have to be exceedingly careful, because the Iceland government is like, don't you screw with the moss, because it takes hundreds of years for it to actually grow to that extent.
Yeah, just a good example also is just near me. Since I live at such high altitude in the Rocky Mountains, when you go up above tree line, whether it's Trail Ridge Road in Rocky Mountain National Park, Pikes Peak, what's right near me is Longs Peak. Is you have once you get above tree line, you have this tundra, and it's the same stuff as Arctic tundra, and it is incredibly slow growth rate, and there's signs up everywhere: do not walk off the road. Don't walk off the trail. You're going to kill something that took 100 years to grow. So anyway, but as these things decompose, it takes longer for them to decompose up there, which also, all these gases are trapped because it's such a slow process. So they're actually able to penetrate and permeate the cellulose and the tissue that's left over of the dead material. So anyway, hey, V-Temp, you want to come in here? Come on, man. Let's hear this. You're sounding a lot like in the chat. It sounds you're very much a doomsday kind of prediction on this. So, are you able to come in? We'll see.
See, my doomsday thing is more just to do with the fact that I think we're totally capable of fixing things, but if my problem is, if history's taught us anything, is that we can't cooperate with each other long enough for anything to actually get done.
Right. We have the can do. We just need the want to.
The social and political will to do
Yeah.
it.
And the ability to put up with each other without starting a world war again.
Well, we are a bunch of crazy apes that beat the shit out of each other a lot, so you know.
Yeah. And this is the same nation that trained the Taliban, so you know.
Well, yeah, we've always that's the same with a lot of cultures. So,
well, yeah, my issue with the way our government works is we're perfectly willing to go into Iran and Iraq and Afghanistan, topple moderate governments for our own political purposes, but then we won't stop like the Rwandan genocide or Bosnian genocide or the genocide in Darfur. That's why I don't think we're ever going to get our shit together, because it's not about actually doing anything that's productive for society as a whole. It's just about our greedy wants.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. Johnny in the side chat put the other one. I was looking for this word. Is putrescine. Is the decaying. It's the what you smell. It's the chemicals let off by decomposing matter and cadaverine. Hydrocarbon diamines, which he's right. Carbon monoxide, hydrocarbon. Or CH4, H2, odorless, ammonia, yes, CO2, choking, and stuff it. I love that. That's good. Yeah, but the hydrogen sulfide is the one that just, that stink, that rotten egg. Ugh, oh God, that's horrible. So, but no, thank you. I was trying to remember the name of putrescine. So, but let's see. Anyone else? Anyone else want in? I'm gonna probably be ending this here fairly soon. We've been going, what, about an hour? Almost that. Oh, wow, an hour and 20 minutes. Okay.
This I was going to say, this has been a phenomenal after show, I have to say.
Well, good. What do you like about it?
Well, no, just the information in addition to what we heard tonight, which I probably need to go back over anyway, but just people who, have a grasp of the science and how, things work. It's refreshing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm going to mute.
Okay. One thing I did take issue with, and Steve kind of, he and I talked about this just extremely briefly before the chat started, is a lot of what the good doctor said tonight. I have a pretty good foundation in science. I mean, I'm not nearly as good at it as Steve is. I mean, shit, fucking nuclear engineer. I'm nowhere near that level. I got some good physics under my belt. I got some good chemistry, some, a lot of good information here, that I got, from my science degree. But I took an issue with a few of the things that the good doctor was saying, particularly when it came to photons and light. Just because that's my general area of expertise and I keep up to date on it. And I think that the doctor and Steve said this as well, I think he's kind of stuck in the 70s and 80s when I think he was more active in the actual doing it as a career, as a job, instead of being
right. I was going to ask, can you break that down exactly what was said and what changes you would make to that as far as information wise? What did you see? Go ahead.
Okay. The biggest problem that I had was with him stating about photons, about them propagating through space, and just his use of the word ether. I mean, we're talking, back in the 1880s for the ether of space. It's not ether. We know way beyond that now. We've known that ever since general relativity, special relativity, stuff like that, quantum mechanics. We now know a hell of a lot more. but the way light waves propagate, how they move, and his saying that they are, just a vibrational frequency, I believe is the way he put it, or how oscillation. How did he put it? I'm trying to remember. But it could only be one thing. But just recently, in the past 4 or 5 years, we have had numerous different studies that have proven that photons and light actually acts as both a particle and a wave. It actually has it's almost like it's quantum entangled or something. It has the characteristics of both without having just one characteristic. It works in two ways. And when I was going to school, this was mostly hypothetical, that it was both a particle and a wave. But now we've had a lot just in the past 5 years. I actually, in the live chat in the last one, I actually put a citation up for a study that showed that yes, it acts as a particle and a wave, which we've pretty much proven. We've got hard scientific evidence to back it up, and it's pretty much borderline on hard scientific theory now that photons and light is actually a particle and a wave. So there's been numerous papers that have been published, peer-reviewed papers that have been published in scientific journals that have shown that, yes, light is a particle and a wave. And he was denying that. And that's the big problem that I had. I was like, wait a minute. But once again, I don't think he's kept up with the most recent research. So I think he's kind of stuck in the 80s in a lot of his thinking. And I think that's where some of his problems come with climate change as well, with some of the other things that he was talking about. The majority, I would say 95% of what he said tonight scientifically was rock solid. It was right on the money. He knows what he's talking about for the vast majority of it. I think he has a little bit of theoretical stuff that goes to the climate issue that he doesn't quite have sufficient enough evidence now for his hypothesis. I think he needs more. So, what were you guys' observations on the science that he put out tonight? Anyone? Bueller?
Go
I
ahead,
mean-
Chris. I'm on mute.
I mean, honestly, I just don't. I don't know enough about it. Is my thing is that my physics education is high school, so
Okay.
that was my problem with my problem trying to understand a lot of what he said is just because I just don't have the education. So everything I know is really either rudimentary or just very specific things that I've researched. Really.
Okay. We've got a couple things. Justin James in the live chat put Einstein's Nobel Prize was discovering a photon was quantized. Yes. Then he also put particle wave duality in the double split experiment are old news. Yes, they were. Thought they were commonplace. Apparently not, according to the doctor. I believe that he is just uninformed. I don't think that he's intellectually dishonest. He said he's either uninformed or intellectually dishonest. From what I got from him, the way he spoke tonight, I don't believe that he is intellectually dishonest. I just
Correct.
think that he is uninformed. Or
Right.
What did you think, Brian?
No, I was just going to say, yeah, I don't see him trying to be deceitful or trying to ignore facts. He just wasn't up to date on a few things that you pointed out.
Okay, right. It's a bit interesting. I mean, the majority of what he said made sense. But he also did say that the greenhouse effect is not possible. I think it kind of is. I think there is some good research that does point in that direction. I mean, and we have seen warming, but also there's other factors that would come into it other than just greenhouse gases. There is some evidence that does point to greenhouse gases and greenhouse warming, the greenhouse effect. and I think that is part of it, but I don't think that's all of it. And I think that's where the media and the social dialogue has basically driven the conversation. I think we need to have a more wide-ranging conversation on the whole climate issue.
Yeah, well, and there needs to be a push for education on the issue, and too. The thing is that people right now, it's just the dialogue.
Exactly.
The dialogue amounts to this is what experts say. Believe what experts say, except that they're not even presenting what the experts are saying.
Right.
Well, I think
And
it's
no
worse
one
than that.
one actually understands what's going on.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. Hold on, Brian.
Yeah, I was going to say it's worse than that, because what we have and what we're observing now is a rise in anti-science, established theory. I mean, it's abysmal. I mean,
And we're seeing it on all sides of the political spectrum.
well, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
yes, I can agree with that. But I'm telling you, within the last 2, 3, 4 years, it's almost out of control. It's like, I mean, look at our politicians. How many of them, they believe that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, and
Yeah, the vice president, for fuck's sake.
Correct.
Well, that's nothing. George Bush literally said when it comes to evolution, the jury is still out.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, the jury's still out because they've already decided.
We're talking about politicians, and these are some of the most disingenuous assholes on the planet, because all they're going to do is pander to make sure that they get and maintain their position of power. So
right, but they're also highly influential in their running
exactly.
society.
But it's even worse than that, because some of them are genuine believers. So it's not like they're just pandering to their base, although they do that. However, I was just listening to a Facebook video speech given by a representative. I can't remember what state he's in. And basically, he wants to go back to Old Testament law of...
the old Mosaic law.
I'm going to say $5 he's from the South.
I actually close. He's Midwest, but...
Well, yeah, it's about the same. Yeah,
the south of the north.
But this is what we're facing now. I mean, look at flat Earth. Yes, religion is going down, but flat Earth is on the rise. Anti-science.
A lot of non-scientific woo is being, jelly juice, for fuck's sake, drinking turpentine, all this other, stuff that is
Tide Pod challenge.
Oh God, go make yourself a jelly juice and turpentine cocktail.
You know what? I'm rethinking the Tide Pod challenge, with the exception of, if you're going to be that dumb enough to put those kind of chemicals into your body,
I just say let them do it.
If it wasn't going to be such a drain. Yeah, I was going to say, if it's going to be a drain on the healthcare system, I would say go for it. The problem is, we have the technology to keep these idiots alive for decades and decades. So there you go.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of and I think you're right. It's gotten a lot worse in the past decade. I'd say it's been more than just 5 years. I think it's slowly been going down, to use a horrible analogy, that slippery slope. But it's slow. We've slowly been devolving. I mean, Devo is becoming more and more one of my favorite bands, because I think in culturally and socially and intellectually, we are de-evolving to a certain extent. I think that people are conscious, or are getting dumber.
Yeah,
I think
it's not a recent thing. It's been, I would argue that, like, one of the major starts of it, the evolution versus creationism debate. That really picked up and started in the 60s.
I would say
that's what my dad grew up with in public schools.
Yeah.
And we're to the place we're still having courtrooms debate it.
Yeah. Most recently,
there's a law against teaching evolution in public schools.
Yeah, the Dover versus Kitchmiller decision.
Yeah,
which thankfully that was a good decision, but the intelligent design bullshit, that was just like, oh no, I don't believe it.
Yeah, I don't think that it's even a recent thing. It's been,
I think it's really
happening.
Yeah, I think it's been actually really been going on since the beginning of the Cold War, because at the beginning of the Cold War, we began, in the early 1950s, more towards the late 50s, but I think that we saw a huge uptick in subversive, or not subversive, but subliminal propaganda, or the propaganda, of controlling people's thought and controlling the social social thought, the way that people are culturally. So I think that's been a huge contributing factor, and I think that people have become so accustomed to it, they've become so used to this propaganda, that they no longer have the filters to see what is propaganda and what is actual fact, or actual demonstrable fact based on evidence.
Right. And also not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So you have a bunch of bad science that's dealt with, but to impugn all of science, I mean, that's just, it's ridiculous. And that's what we're seeing. So we're like, well, because there was a screw up here, well, then it's all, a major conspiracy, and they're trying to mislead us. And I have to say, I was in that camp at one time.
Right.
So Smitty in the chat was just going on, and he said the average human IQ is higher now than it was before. Your argument is invalid.
I'm sorry, did he miss the 2016 election?
Yeah. He also said, if you think subliminal propaganda started with the Cold War, you're a fool. No, it didn't start with the Cold War.
Brian.
I think that's where it came into prominence. I think that's where it really started to be used on a mass scale, much more than it has in the past. We've had propaganda and rhetoric and all that throughout all of human history, but I think that with the advent of radio and television, and also print, it's been going on ever since print. I mean, look at the 1920s and yellow journalism. It's been going on for a long time. Even before that, you had the papers of New England at the beginning of this of our country, of the United States. You had the hugely biased papers in England, in Germany, in Europe, everything from the advent of the printing press. It was propaganda that was put out. And I think with the advent of television and print and radio, and now we have all this new media, of course, the number one of them all, the friggin' internet, now everybody has a voice to put out their version of propaganda. But I think because we've been overwhelmed with it, we've been desensitized to it, to where we're much more we don't recognize it for what it is, and we're much more susceptible to it.
Smitty just retorted back. Propaganda has been the norm since the start, but we didn't have free communication without people controlling the conversation before the internet.
He's not totally wrong.
Yeah,
he's not totally wrong.
He's not totally wrong, but he's not totally correct either. He did put a good one. Ever heard of churches? They are I would say the number one throughout human history for propagandizing.
And now he's sitting there, the motherfucking Bible is pure propaganda. Dude, there's a lot of propaganda in it, but I can fight you on this. And so
don't pick this.
Hundreds of scholars who are sitting behind me.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's other religions which are much more on the propaganda spectrum.
You want to read propaganda, read the fucking Quran.
Yeah, the Quran is wow. I mean but that's also, that was one of the more recent major religions to develop, other than Mormonism. Mormonism is really good at propaganda. Holy crap. You agree with me there, right, Chris?
Oh yeah.
My wife is a former Mormon, okay? I've had to deal with her family.
Yeah, here we go. Here's my.
Oh no! Oh god, no! You don't want to see mine. Mine has got all the different.
Yeah, the Scientology used to be pretty.
What's great about mine is that I bought it used. And
Scientology,
some guy put a little message in the front of it saying about, dear reader, everything in here is true. Just give it a chance, will ya?
Yeah. I think the best one though that he did put is Mormonism, but Scientology, I don't know if I would actually classify that as a religion.
Cult.
It's a cult, right? It is definitely. I would definitely classify that as a cult, and we're probably going to get demonetized now, and we're probably going to be followed around by private investigators just because we said the cult word in association with Scientology.
Now you've pissed off Tom Cruise.
Yeah, I know. All those other people. Oh well.
You know what?
Yeah,
I have one thing to say to Tom Cruise, and that's show me the money.
No, come out of the closet.
Hey,
Hey Brian, hey, welcome. Tell you what, I'm gonna go grab a cup of coffee. Brian, why don't you give us your take on the chat? You watched the chat, I'm assuming?
I have not seen the chat tonight, but speaking of the Book of Mormon, I find it so interesting that all of us have a Book of Mormon on our shelves. That's
Yeah.
You a good Mormon boy. You make a good Mormon boy. Yes, you will.
Yeah, I gotta use the restroom, guys. I've been sitting here for 3.5 hours. I need more coffee. Must remain highly caffeinated at all times. So tell us your take on this, Brian, since you just joined us. So let us know what you think, and I will be back momentarily.
Sure. Well, I really liked the debate. I think it was 2 nights ago between Apologia and Mike Winger. I don't know if I got those names correct, but it was rather interesting. But and someone summed it up improperly, saying believe the Bible because the Bible is true. Near the end of the debate, that was said. But I think Mike Winger was going across of we can believe eyewitness testimony because, and then he laid out really specifics on like here's A, B, C, D, E, F for what the eyewitness testimonies of the Bible say, and then it's like, okay, if people don't have A, B, C, D, E, F, then I don't believe them. And he just labeled off a really specific itinerary. Sorry for my slurring, of what he wanted, and none of them were good. It's like, I don't know. The Book of Mormon has eyewitnesses. There's people who witnessed the angel Moroni and the golden plates. So I don't see why anything's better in the Bible than what we have in the Book of Mormon.
Well, he even admitted that there was some kind of arbitrariness going on to there, right? Yeah. I mean, he eventually had to say, look, I have to hold myself at the same standards, but he clearly had a bias in that. But, I every so often I'll go back and then I'll look into some of the evidences for the supposed evidence of for the Book of Mormon, right? And, looking through my eyes now, the apologetics to me seem no different than the apologetics for anything I've ever, anything else I've read, right? They're very, very weak. They just don't seem to make sense to me there's just not evidence, archaeological evidence, the Book of Abraham, any of that stuff doesn't make sense. And even the type of apologetics where they say, well, the steel is this meteoric steel, and the gold is this copper alloy that the Spaniards had that's mixed with gold and copper. And these, they weren't horses. They were actually these little creatures called, or what the heck are they called? I forget that. You know what I'm thinking of? I can't think of the name.
It was one thing that Mike Winger said that really got on my nerves. He talked about how the 4 Gospels contradict, and he said that is more evidence that they are true, since there's contradictions or things that are not analogous. And he talked about the child who said he went to heaven, the kid who saw heaven or whatever that story was. And he was like, well, the Mormons have the story where it's like, okay, these people recanted their story, and then this child who went to heaven recanted, saying his family told him. But that child is evidence that Christianity is true because he recanted. But Mormonism, when they recanted, is evidence that Mormon is not true. That's why I'm just done with apologetics.
Yeah, like I pointed out to him, I mean, that wasn't a good argument for the fact that the witnesses that did leave, apostatized, none of them ever said Joseph Smith was a fraud. So it didn't really help his argument.
Were you a Mormon, Steve? I heard that in the video.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that till in the video. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate your channel, and that's why I throw some super chats your way. I really appreciate it. I should become a Patreon. So,
yeah. Speaking of Patreon, put it in live chat there. Patreon is like the way to go. Super chats are great. Don't get me wrong. I love them. But I'd rather have like $5 a month super Patreon that I know it's
I'll go do that.
That pays my rent and everything else. I live off Patreon. I don't get anything from Non Sequitur yet. We haven't touched it.
Well, if you didn't notice, Steve, I cut my hair. My hair's a lot shorter now. It was all down. But Christopher, I got to give it to him. He's holding it up for me, keeping the hair long. I like it. So A+ to Christopher.
Just
I love the hippie hair.
You see me about 2 months ago, or not? And that's 2 years ago. My hair was about down to there. So.
And Christopher, are you a master's candidate or a PhD candidate?
No, not yet. I'm still finishing up my bachelor's, actually.
I'm shocked by that. You're quite educated on these matters.
Really, right? He is, huh?
Yeah.
When it comes to this stuff.
Well, thank you very much.
We shouldn't say I dabble in the education sphere, but keep it up. You're doing quite well.
Thanks. Yeah.
I wish I was smart with him.
When it comes to the apologia versus winger debate, I'm going to be honest. I love you, Paul. I don't think you debate super well.
No, he could have done a lot better. I agree.
And I honestly, like, you know, I don't think either side debated very well. I really wish Paul had gone with the Bart Ehrman approach to things, but
Paul was very nice throughout the debate. I mean, it was a very cordial debate.
He was way too nice. He was too lenient. He let too many things slide that he could have nailed.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that's okay. I mean, it was all right. I mean, we need to be cordial with each other. I really hate, I've spoken to many apologetics, and especially on the college campus that I'm on, I speak to a lot of people who just, they ask like, what the famous question is, do you know anything absolutely? And I would say no. And then they say, do you know that absolutely? And I'm like, oh my gosh. And Steve probably has a lot to say on that, but.
Well, run that by me again. I'm sorry, I was focused on something.
Well, they go, okay, they'll throw something at me like, is rape wrong? And I'll say, yes, rape is wrong. And they say, so are there moral absolutes? And I'll say, there are no moral absolutes. And then they'll say, do you know that absolutely?
Yeah, that's
it's just entrapment.
No, now you're.
I would say, no, I don't know that absolutely.
Yeah, now you're starting to go down like, you know, Darwin's deity route. It's no, don't.
Yeah.
It's the Psi 10 pre-sup route.
Yeah.
No, that sounds like a bad Kent Hovind joke.
Oh, it's, you know who I would love to get together is Darwin's deity and Ken Ham.
No. God, no.
No, that would be a medical waste dumpster fire that causes a train wreck.
I don't want to see DD in anything ever again. I was in a debate with that motherfucker.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. That was 3 or 4 years ago, Steve.
What's that? 4 years ago? What?
Yeah, we actually were we had a chat with Darwin's deity.
Oh God, yeah, that's been years.
That's like 4 years ago. Oh my God. Yeah, see, I've been following Steve, and Steve and I have been in chats a lot for about 4 years now, 4.5. Yeah, something like that. But anyway, I feel so sorry for you, Christopher. I mean, I'm sorry. It's like getting in there with Nephilim free.
I like Nephilim free better. Nephilim free's entertaining.
Yeah, he is. He's
just infuriating.
Yeah, he's batshit crazy and infuriating, but he's at least entertaining. Whereas Darwin's is just all he does is that same fucking script every damn time.
Okay. Does anybody know who Wildwood Claire is?
Yeah, she's a PhD in geology.
Okay, now you have not lived until you have heard Wildwood Claire refer to Nephilim Free as sweet cheeks. As she is
raking him, please.
No, hold on. As she is raking him over the coals for his lack of knowledge in geology, it is absolutely to die for.
I love people that just act cheeky while they're just annihilating someone. This is one of my favorite things.
She is such a sweetheart. I mean, she'll just calmly tell him how much of an idiot he is, and just say, "Well, sweet cheeks, looks like you got something else wrong." I mean, it's just I just died. I fell out of my chair.
Brian, so you saw the video I put up today. Did you see the jab I made at Arn Ra?
Yes, I saw.
I didn't see it. What did you jab at Arn Ra?
I wept tears.
Arn Ra. I like him.
Okay,
yes,
so
we love Arn Ra.
I like Arn Ra. Don't get me wrong. He's great at science education.
Yes.
I mean, specify science education for a reason. But one of the things that I have, I think, eight or 9 videos of him where he claims that Job is the oldest book in the Bible.
What?
Okay,
yeah.
I used to think that too. I mean, it's kind of
it's a common misconception.
You can't blame him for that.
I have an entire list of videos that I have of his, and it's just him and like talking about mythology and stuff, and it's wrong. all the time, consistently. And the Job one is like the most consistent one that I have. Like, you know, at least 8 videos, and I can guarantee there are more because I haven't even watched.
Okay, I would like to make a
hundreds of stuff.
disclaimer. I'd like to make a disclaimer. Aaron Raw, if you're listening to this, we love you. And
Aaron,
yeah,
by the
Aaron,
yeah.
we love you.
But
Okay.
so I put out a video today, and it's all about the composition and dating and authorship of the Book of Job. And I made just a little jab. I put in a little picture of Aaron Raw, and with a little message that said, "Yo, Aaron, the Book of Job is not the oldest book in the Bible. If you could stop saying that anytime, it'd be great."
Yeah,
That's just terrible.
that would be a great topic for a non-sex show, is you and Aaron talking about that. I think that would be
love that. If I could do that, I would absolutely adore it, because I've been wanting to talk to Aaron, mostly because he is actually a hero of mine, because he's one of the reasons I actually left the faith.
Okay.
I actually met him in Milwaukee at a humanist rally.
I'm so
Nicest
jealous.
nicest guy you'd ever meet. I mean, wow.
Yeah, I would love to meet him as well. I really do respect his educational stuff, especially the stuff that he does with the Texas Teachers or the Texas Educational
Yes.
textbook stuff. I mean, that is, I give him huge props for that. I think we need a lot more people to stand up to all of these intelligent, or the intelligent design group and all these, and well, not Answers in Genesis, but all these other, theological organizations that are trying to go in and pervert education. I really do give him a lot of pride. And I'm also a biker. He's a biker. We got that in common. I want to go for a ride with that guy.
By the way, if you guys want to know,
It's a victory, but I do want to go for a ride with him.
I've triggered like 100 atheists just in the last 15 minutes. Just
I saw it.
Steve, you are sick.
I'm on like 3 different threads. They can't read. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris. Read my OP, and does it give very specific directions?
Do you want me to read the one on Facebook here?
It doesn't matter. They're all the same. Yeah.
Okay. Atheism has a burden of proof, period. If you define it as merely a lack of belief, that merely moves your burden of proof from a first order burden to a second order. If you think this is wrong, write me your argument using at least one peer-reviewed paper or academic source. Else you will be dismissed. My sources: Dr. Malik, Defining Atheism and the Burden of Proof, 2018. Dr. Alex Malpass, who agrees it is a second order justification set.
And by the way, Dr. Zemer agrees as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have three PhD citations. I think that's adequate to ask somebody for a citation, right? Of equal caliber.
Yeah.
Do you not? Okay. Not one person has given me a citation before. Not one person. Not even a person give me an argument on that. They're just throwing out shit. So I'm just writing. I'm like, not an argument, no citation, dismissed.
Well,
Steve,
I have a meme somewhere in my collection. That was a joke, by the way. Awkward silence. It's okay.
I wonder how many memes have been made of Steve already.
I'm just dismissing. That's all I do. I like, look at what am I supposed to do? They can't follow simple instructions.
Well, yeah, I'm an atheist, and my only thing that I say is that I just don't believe the story. So that's it. I just don't believe it.
But you have a second order burden of justification. Now, all
honestly, at this point, I'm just about to start trolling people with Immanuel Kant.
Oh God.
I actually have a Kant meme too.
Ooh, I hope that's spicy. That better be spicy.
It's actually a funny meme. It's really not philosophical. I'll keep it to myself.
I mean, okay. I mean, 80% of Kant, when you read him, really doesn't end up being philosophical because it's just him ranting.
He was the first internet ranter, I think. If he was alive today, he would have rant videos all over YouTube.
When I read Kant, I get 20% of it is actual philosophical content. The other 80% is him talking gibberish. He has like a Hegel problem, except
What,
Hegel is just
Finnegan's
100% gibberish.
Well, like Finnegan's Wake.
For
For those of you that have never seen Finnegan's Wake, one, you can't read it because it is literal gibberish. It's nonsensical. There have been scholars that have tried to decode it. They've tried to figure it out. Nobody can figure this out. It's like the Codex Seraphinae. It's pure gibberish. It's like a monkey sat at a typewriter and just banged its head on the keyboard.
Maybe I should give a go at it because I can translate Mr. ID.
Well, if you might have a good chance because Mr. ID, and he is pure gibberish. Who was it that actually read his book? Who was that? Was that Red?
I've read one of his books now.
Oh, you've read one. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Hey, Steve, can I throw something out there?
Mm-hmm.
Ocean wants in here. He said no one's addressed the Job thing. So I'm wondering what Ocean has to say about
I love you, Ocean.
let's pull some Ocean in.
Okay.
I need some Zeus. I need some Thor. I need some.
You have a sexy ass beard.
Let's all do the wave.
This is for Shannon Q. I asked her about 50 times what the name of the alcohol was. And so this is for Shannon Q right here.
Hey, let's all turn our cameras on. Let's do the wave as soon as Ocean comes in.
Do the wave.
Yay!
That's wait, what's going on where now? Who now? What now?
We're doing the wave once Ocean joins.
So bring in Ocean. I want to know. Well, so there was an earlier claim made that Job is not the earliest book of the Bible. But I want to ask this question because Christopher, you seem quite educated on the Bible. About how many books of the Bible are we very sure on the authorship and also the year they were authored? I mean, you can educate me on that. I mean, I know the Gospels are a little bit anonymous and probably about 30 to 100 years after Jesus's death. Ish,
yeah. So, most critical scholars are going to put. I'll start with the New Testament because that's actually the easier one. So most scholars are going to put critical scholars are going to put the book of the Gospel of Mark as the earliest gospel as late as 68 to 70 AD on average, and then the other gospel, Matthew and Luke, around 82 to 90. And
is that the earliest dating?
That's like around 90 to 110.
So the earliest dating is 30 years after. Like that's the earliest is Mark 30 years after.
For the Gospels, yes.
Yes,
the Gospels are completely anonymous, but we're pretty certain of the dating. Mark has enough internal references, like references to the fall of the temple, which is year 70, and references to like conflict in Judea, that we're pretty certain that was probably around circa year 68, 70. And we know that Matthew and Luke made use of Mark and another, and I side with the existence of Q. So, I think they used Q as well, and then had their own M&L sources.
When you say the existence of Q, what do you mean? I'm confused here.
So the Q source is right now it's a hypothetical document that is basically a collection of sayings of Jesus, and it has no overarching narrative. There are some narrative stories in it, but there's no overarching narrative to it. And the reason that we think it was an existing document is primarily based on the Gospels of Matthew, Luke, and the apocryphal Gospel of Thomas.
So this is apocryphal text, right? It's
Q's a non-canon text. It no longer exists in any form that we have it in its original form in any way that we know of. The closest that we would have to it would be the Gospel of Thomas, which is also a collection of sayings of Jesus, but none of the collections are narrative in form.
Cool.
So that's one of the differences between Thomas and Q. But I think Thomas alone is actually a good argument for the existence.
I invited Ocean. Did you give him the link?
Let's get some Ocean.
Link? Yeah, thank you.
So
Can you
Am I
give
gonna-
yeah, the other books, we know that Paul wrote 7 of the letters based on their theological content and how consistent they are, and because they don't have the hints of later dating that the other epistles do as well. So
Can I just say what I think Paul was? I think Paul was a very smart man who realized this whole religion thing is big business. And he figured, I'm just going to get in on it on the ground floor. I'm going to say I saw Jesus, and I'm going to put all this, like, I just think Paul saw what was happening, because if you look at the world in the lesser developed world, I don't mean that as a slight against the world over there, but we have a lot of claims still in the modern day of people rising from the dead, of miracles, of things that are supernatural. And I think that's what they were doing back then. I think they were making these claims, and then they were getting people to believe these claims. So I think Paul was just doing what people were doing, and he was a really good salesman.
Well, can I ask you this? As far as Paul, what did he have to gain by just trying to weasel his way into it? I mean,
he did the reason I don't find that one holds is because Christianity at the time was such a small religion and not a favored religion in any way, shape, or form.
Get it on the ground floor. That's ground floor right there. That is like, you are the proprietor of Christianity.
Well, that's
Well, I
all-
know, but there's no gain for being the proprietor of a religion that's hated.
yeah, and it was pretty much secretive at the time. There wasn't a lot of people. I mean, there was some persecution going on of Christians, things like that, to where there weren't a whole hell of a lot out there, and they were looked upon as cult members and weirdos.
So, I mean, that's when you buy a failing business. Like, that's like, you're like, okay, this business is failing. I'm buying it and I'm reforming it and I'm making my own. And that's what he did. Because when you look at the Mike Winger debate, Paul is like the central person, because Jesus appeared to him on the road to Damascus. And I always say to people who preach to me, I'm like, if Jesus would appear to Paul on the road to Damascus, why will he not appear to me?
Yeah.
Right.
I made the same argument before.
Yeah.
Right. No, I think that Paul legitimately thought that he had a vision. I don't think that Jesus actually appeared in any way.
He was hallucinating. It was ergo fungus that got him there. Anyway,
I want to distinguish, because there's a difference between a vision and a hallucination.
right.
Basically.
Okay, hold on. Ocean the Wizard, you are here. You finally made it in. Hey,
Wizard?
Yay!
Anymore?
Let's all
Ocean.
do the wave.
you're muted. Hold on.
You
Is he
need to
He's
unmute.
right here and he doesn't talk to us. What the hell? Come on, dude.
He says he can't unmute.
Can't unmute? I don't have him muted. Does anybody else?
Oh, it says he needs to be revealed by a mod.
I gave you guys all mods. You guys have no idea what you're doing, do you? You all have mods.
God damn, Steve, why are you putting these incompetent people in charge? What the fuck?
Oh, come on. Nobody else is available.
Oh, I'm not. I don't have mod status either.
Brian, I sent you messages on Facebook being like, "Can I get a link?" God damn it!
There you go.
Oh,
I
I'm
hate
so
all of
sorry.
you.
I missed.
Steve, I'm like bothering you on Facebook,
That's
and
fine.
it's like people are saying I've been added, and I'm like, "What the fuck?" And
Ocean,
so
Ocean. I am balls deep in oil right now. I can't even check.
I figure that's whatever. As you get yourself oiled up there, buddy. I love it. No, he's
Welcome,
laughing.
Ocean. Welcome. So what's
Too
your
hard.
take?
I'm confused because when there was the question of what was the oldest book in the Bible, and someone said that Aaron Roth thinks it's Job, and then everybody laughed, and then I started like looking around, being like, well, what is the oldest book in the Bible? Every resource I've found says Job, so
I wasn't laughing at all.
I'm confused as to like if it's not true, it's not laughable, and if it because it seems like everybody's fucking saying it. And if it is true, I don't know why you're making fun of him for it.
Everyone says it. It became really popular in Christianity because everyone decided that it had to be like older than Moses or like the oldest and stuff like that. And there were several scholars who thought it early on in the 20th century. And so it caught on for quite a bit, and it's been basically stayed in Christian circles.
All right, what is the oldest book?
No, it's not.
What No, what is? I'm asking a question.
Okay, we don't know for sure what is the oldest book in the Bible, but we know it's not Job. And the reason we know it's not Job is because Job makes use of Isaiah, makes use of Genesis, makes use of some of
that
the
doesn't
Psalms.
mean it's not the oldest. Come on now.
Well,
If it quotes other texts, that just means it was changed later on. Come on. It can still be older and have additions.
Actually, the problem is that in order to say that they changed the text later, you actually have to have a good reason for doing that. And
They fucking let several of them change. That's
well,
the
yeah,
nature
several
of
of
world
them
tradition.
changed, but that doesn't
Just so
mean
we can
this
have
one
this
has
discussion
changed.
now.
If you want to make the argument that something has changed,
No, what I'm
generally,
saying, I'm not saying that it
as
did
a-
change
as
or it
a
didn't change. I'm
linguistic
saying that the reason you're suggesting is not a good one because it could have. Now, what's the reason why they think it's 20? It's like what, the second millennium BC or some shit that it was written down? Like it was early shit. I don't know what the evidence for that is. That's the origin point evidence is what I would be asking about.
Okay, this one's gonna get.
He's climbing the bookshelf. Don't fall.
Ocean, you should be reading these right now.
Okay. So there is an argument. There are actually people that you could make a weak but a circumstantial argument that it could date back to the second millennium because it actually has literary parallels that go back that far.
Okay.
But
then you could say that not conclusively that it's the oldest, but you can suggest that it might be.
You could suggest it, but there is no really good case to do it.
I mean, nobody's saying that there's 2,000-year-old manuscripts lying around, right? So
no, there is none. The oldest manuscripts we have for Job are going to be Dead Sea Scrolls, a few of Hebrew fragments from like the 1st century, and Septuagint.
Am I correct that it's that the suggestion is that it comes from the same era as Homer because of the similarity in the writing?
No.
No. Okay.
There are some. Okay. There are some.
First off, I don't know shit about this. As far I know, like I don't know about Job anyway. I do know like a little bit about the history of writing, but I don't think like if whatever Job was written. I'm not quite sure what the evidence is for all of that. I'm just wondering what you're laughing off of something that seems to be commonly cited. So
it definitely is. So there are arguments that have been actually made for a Hellenistic date for the Book of Job. So in order to make the argument that Job is influenced by Hellenistic culture, you actually have to look at when Hellenistic culture was influencing Judea in particular. That's not until around the 3rd century BCE. So, and there are scholars that have argued it. John W.
That's iffy because you have cultural evidence of at least similar god worship being spread for those areas,
but not with Israel. So
yes, with Israel, Asher,
with the Phoenicians,
among the Judaics too. They're Canaanites.
Yes,
they followed Canaanite gods.
Okay. Yeah. Yes and no.
I mean, if you're assuming that the Jews were monotheist, like going back to the second millennium BC, I don't think anybody thinks that either.
They're not they weren't monotheists, but I know for a fact they were henotheists.
No, they were polytheists at that point.
A henotheist is a polytheist,
but they were polytheist in like the Greek sense, like there's several gods that they worshipped. We have statues.
They were not. No, they were early on and around the 8th century.
We're talking about 2,000 years ago when we're talking about Job.
2,000 years ago, there were no Israelites.
There were people in the area then.
Like 2,000 years.
The Jews consider themselves like of a lineage that goes back that far. They consider themselves of the Jewish tradition routinely considered, not 2,000 years ago, I'm sorry, 2000 BC is what I'm referencing when I'm saying 2,000 years ago. So the second millennium BC, Jews tend to say that their tradition is like 5,000 years old.
Yes,
which it wouldn't be 5,000 years old monotheistically, but you can give a cultural lineage to them that's roughly that long. It's just that it's going to have massive changes throughout it.
I can give an ethnic and linguistic one, and some religious.
So when are you saying they became henotheistic? From polytheistic. But what I'm talking about is their worship of Asher goes back to 2nd millennium BC, which is the reason, which is their worship of we have god statues of a polytheistic culture going back to that area from an extremely long period of time.
Asher's not a Canaanite.
Maybe not specifically. Asher, there's a what's her fucking name? Wife of God. Ashura, that's correct.
Yeah. Ashura. Here, let me explain. So, yes, they were Canaanites. Canaanites originally worshipped El and Ashura as their head deities at the top of the pantheon. They had a multi-tiered system of deities. The next tier were their children, and the top among the food chain there was Baal and Dagon. And then Kothar Wakhasis of the craftsman tier, which was the next one. And then below that, they had basically a bunch of irrelevant messenger deities. Now, the Israelites, when they came about, they basically came about in the power vacuum that was left after the Bronze Age collapse. So that's going to be around the 13th to 10th centuries BCE is when they come up.
All right. The idea is that Job was written before that.
Right. That's the
honestly, that
people like to make. The problem
there's an argument that Moses wrote his stuff in 14 something BC as well. Yeah, which I don't think that Moses existed, but traditionally he's the writer.
It is so yeah, I don't think I actually think Moses existed, and I have an argument for it. It's not a great one. And I realize it's not a great one, but
if I were somebody who just wanted to pray in a conversation I can win and I'd chase that tangent, but I want to I'm more interested in talking about Canaanite polytheism just because I think it's fun, even though I don't know a whole lot about it.
She existed probably around the 13th century.
What?
Late 14th, early 13th centuries BCE, actually, for Moses.
Moses?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, that's not too far from what the traditional is. It's late 14th.
It depends on who you ask, because if you go to AIG, they try dating him to the 16th century BCE or something like that. And the reason they do that is they're trying to push him back, because the archaeology actually ended up showing that the more scholarly date for Moses' time period, which is 13th century, there was no evidence of Jericho being destroyed. So
Jericho is destroyed earlier than what. Yeah, that's one of the weird things about it.
But
it's also significantly earlier, isn't it? It was 300, 400 years earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, even the date they're pushing back to is still too late.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have gotten way the hell off.
Anyway,
so this is we're having a conversation in which we're trying to justify the veracity of a claim that there's a text that was written in 2000 BC. So if we want to try and repeat this stuff, I don't think that you can conclusively say that it is. I also don't think that you can conclusively say that it isn't.
Well,
because it does have the oldest literary cues.
Okay. Well, if I can make my argument,
go for it.
Okay, so we have no text that ever mentions Job at all in 2000 BC. None.
Yeah, that doesn't matter.
The first time he pops up outside of the book of Job. So if we discount when Job was written, the first time he pops up outside the book of Job is the book of Ezekiel. And the book of Ezekiel we can date because of all of its internal evidence and references to Babylon and the political climate of the time to just before the Babylonian exile.
I forget when that was.
That's around 586 BCE.
I'm going to assume you're right. And that makes a certain amount of sense.
So so that's one reason to give Job a later date, is because we have no text mentioning him before that at all. So the next thing to do is to look at the internal evidence in Job and what it's referencing. It as a creation narrative in it, a brief little one that some scholars, if you want to read more on that, see John E. Hartley's commentary.
I knew he was hiding books.
John E. Hartley argues that it's and Nahum Sarna, another one. And you can find his paper on it for free on JSTOR. are both made a pretty substantial argument, both linguistically and through comparative literature, that it's actually a parody of the Book of Genesis, their creation story. And what
So you
should
think it's the Onion article of Bible books?
kinda. What should also be noted is that stylistically, it's in the same hand as the rest of the book of Job. So we know it's the same author as well. Well, not the rest of the book.
Somebody who is good at imitating.
I should say the most of the poetic narrative, poetic dialogue. It comes in during Yahweh's speeches. So this also gets into the composition problems. It looks like what ended up happening, and there's Nahum Sarna and various other scholars actually argue that the prelude and epilogue were part of a narrative story of Job, and that the dialogue was inserted into that and replaced the original narrative middle. And there's lots of really good.
Saying that the narrative, okay, what I've always heard is that the bookends came later, and that
there's a lot of debate over it, and I actually myself argue that it came later, but for the most part it's irrelevant, because the point really is that the prologue epilogue portion has a different author from the dialogue portion, and then Elihu's section, which is completely obligatory and is never brought up before or after it is in there, is from another author. And the wisdom poem, in Job chapter 28, which has nothing to do with anything at all and just interrupts the story, that was added by someone else as well. And and some scholars think that basically what ended up happening is that later redactor who's adding all that in is the one that ended up screwing up the dialogue, because the dialogue has a broken form of, it's supposed to be 3 sets of 3 dialogue sets, but the last triplet is actually broken up.
Ocean, I actually have a question for you.
Okay, there's a couple of, I've already had this. My instant messages are blowing up in a couple of other places right now, because there's a couple of people I know that are watching this, and one of them is saying that there's at least 2 sources comparing Homer to Job, which I think is I would need to get more information. This ain't my topic, by the way. I'm not as I think I came in saying that.
Well, I want to know a few things about your views on this, Ocean, if you don't mind me asking.
Fuck.
Okay.
You want personal opinions on things?
Sure. Well,
oh goodness.
Regarding, we're talking about the Bible here, and I know you're more of a Norse person, correct?
Yeah, Bible's okay. So my knowledge of the Bible, I wound up. This is to give you I was a Christian for a long time.
Okay.
And I dug into a lot of history of it because my degree was in Christian history, but that doesn't mean biblical history. So, or my degree was in history, but I spent a lot of time on Christian history. So. And I haven't spent much time after getting that degree focusing too much on it. I've been more interested in other areas of history, mainly Northern Europe. But go for it. What's your question?
Sure. Well,
I just want to give you a huge caveat if you're going to be asking me Bible questions.
Sorry.
It's a big topic, and there's people that know way more than me that can answer this.
Well, yeah, and that's this goes more towards what you believe, not what you know.
Okay.
The 67 books of the Bible, am I correct? 67.
I don't fucking know. See, that's how familiar I am.
60-ish books of the Bible. Regarding those books of the Bible, are they just things people wrote? Are they divinely inspired? What would you say regarding that?
Oh, if you're talking about as far as just spiritual texts in general, I have a pretty common view on most of them. Going from the Bible to the Bhagavad Gita to the Eddas and several. I think that they're. I usually give them the benefit of the doubt that we're dealing with this. Spiritual revelation of some kind. We're looking at spiritual texts, especially when they're having spiritual discussions. So I think the Bhagavad Gita more so goes under this than the Bible does, because the Bible is a lot of history texts. It seems to be people writing about themselves, and then there's a few things in there about exchanges with deity or spiritual experiences or what have you.
So do you believe these books are people in some ways? You said the Bible's more historical. The Bhagavad Gita is more
its
spiritual.
goal is more historical.
Okay.
The Bhagavad Gita's goal is more spiritual.
And do you believe these books have people actually connecting with the divine or trying to connect? I mean, like, are they actually doing that? Or are they trying to?
I mean, this is one of those things where you get into the problem of experience is non-transferable. So I wasn't in these authors' heads. I don't know.
Yeah. And
my thing is with
honest.
Christians have a long tradition of having spiritual experiences and responses during prayer and all that shit. So I think that there's a certain amount of reality to it, but I don't think that the God that they're worshiping is necessarily the God they're describing, especially since a lot of the attributes to the God they're describing come much later in their tradition.
So how do we come to know the divine and know truth regarding the divine?
How are talking about from a certainty standpoint? I mean, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and that's what I deal with as a statistician. I deal with certainty, and there's a lot of uncertainty in what we deal with.
Right. I have a spiel on this, which I think I've thrown at Steve a couple of times,
Sure.
Because he's agnostic, and that's funny. But
When
you're going to have uncertainty, it's fine to have uncertainty. I don't think that it's good to necessarily be dogmatic about it completely. Like if there's uncertainty about a lot of things that some people decided to take a leap of faith on, like reality exists. When you get out of solipsism, there's no certainty around it, but you don't have to be dogmatic about that uncertainty. You can make certain assumptions for the sake of pragmatic reasons.
Well, I will agree. Like, I exist and other minds exist. I think
but this is the reason why solipsism gets brought up in theistic conversations. Because what usually happens is that atheists are like, well, we're going to be dogmatically uncertain about this, but we're not going to apply that reasoning of dogmatic uncertainty to anything fucking else.
Do you know what I find funny? The only time solipsism gets brought up is in these discussions of religion. If you talk politics, if you talk anything else, no one brings up, like, how do you know reality exists? No one brings that up.
Right. Because usually in politics, you're having a discussion on the basis of how to run a society, and whether or not reality exists is not part of that conversation at all, is it?
It's a precept.
No, it's axioms that people arguing politics generally agree on. It's like everybody agrees that there's societies, and societies are made up of multiple minds. If you're going to start arguing there's not multiple minds, then what are you doing arguing about running a society?
And also you're dealing with the supernatural in religion as well. So
I think there's
itself to uncertainty, certainty, the solipsism arguments there. So
that's the problem I have with a lot of religious debates is we get into this idea of, like, how do we know we even exist? How do we know, like, what is
we're
more?
all brains in vats. We're all brains in jars with little wires and electrodes.
That's what Sai Ten believes. He believes he could be a brain in a vat. I'll throw that at Sai Ten anytime. I actually spoke to him via Facebook, and he admits he could be a brain in a vat. So I don't even know how he knows anything. Steve and I talked about this last time.
Hasn't he gotten around that by saying that, like, it's revealed to him or some shit?
So is he the man
revealed to me that I'm not a brain?
I don't think he believes that, does he?
Is he the man?
That's his argument. I don't know if it's his honest argument, but that's his argument.
Yeah, I don't think he even.
I don't think that Sai Ten knows the definition of an honest argument.
No. And
it's on this subject. I try to engage as honestly as possible. So if you get into the Sai Ten stuff, it's like I don't believe that I've had some kind of revelation from God telling me that God is real, and that revelation, that revelation experience is that from which I justify all other experiences. I haven't had that experience. He claims to have. I haven't, so I can't say that I can't justify anything without that experience because I have no idea what he's talking about. So
all he says is revelation from Scripture. That's his main argument.
I want to throw this out to
he goes with Scripture from that. I'm sorry, dude. I keep like running over you.
That's all right. But I'm going to throw this out to the Sai 10 right now that I have had revelation that I am not a brain in a vat. It's revelation that has been given to me, and I would like Sai 10 to go against that because I have personal revelation, and it's a precept.
If you're going to give personal revelation, like, okay, here's my problem with arguments like that is no, you fucking
it's nonsense.
It's I don't enjoy dishonest debate, especially if you're going to be like just. This is the fairy in the garden argument when you get into people that argue against polytheism. That do you have a problem with the guy who communicates with the fairy in the garden? Ultimately, no, but that's not my belief. So
Okay. One thing is how the hell did we get all the way from? How did we get into
The
theology?
statistician asked about things.
Okay.
We were talking about history, but
right.
this
I
guy
was just
comes in
wondering,
here with the
like, how
alcohol.
did we end up going down this rabbit hole?
You know,
Take me
one
wildly off topic here.
I'm going to ask statistician Brian later is going to be about Bayes' theorem.
Oh no, I'm more that. I'm taking a class in Bayesian right now. I'm taking Bayesian statistics. It's
After
my mind.
That's
after
one
you
that
take it, I want to hear what your opinion is on, on
okay,
Richard Carrier.
What is Richard Carrier uses a lot, and the guy who debated Matt Dillahunty, who's one of his good friends. Actually, you know what's funny? I called the atheist experience. And I was gonna like kind of talk to them about this, and I had to go, but they wanted me to like give my input on Bayes' theorem and all that stuff. Bayes' theorem is just more like the probability of A times probability of B over the probability of A and B. So it's a bunch of it's prior assumptions. Let me sum it up that way. What you bring with Bayes' theorem is your priors. So if someone says that they believe,
yeah, I know what it is.
Yeah,
I think a lot of us know what it is, but what I kind of want to know is what your opinion is on how Richard Carrier uses it, because I've heard varying objections to him, saying some people say he's doing it perfectly fine, some people say they hate what he's doing.
Sure.
So
it's all bullshit. Excuse my language. But
Carrier's method?
Both. What is the guy's name? What is the
Christopher. Christopher, wasn't there somebody who actually used the Bayesian theorem?
I know 4 scholars that use it in regards to history. I know 4.
Well, let me explain what you can do. Okay, I'm going to explain with my hands here. You ready? Bayes' theorem is like this. What you can do is you can take the information and you can take your priors and you can weight the information in the priors. So you can weight towards your prior assumptions. So if you weight your prior assumptions heavier, you can just conclude whatever you want with your prior assumptions.
Exactly.
So correct.
Priors. So in other words, it's all bullshit if you use it improperly. If it's properly used, it's not bullshit. But if you weight your priors this way, then you'll just assume your priors.
Right.
Yeah, there was an apologist.
But that's my problem with everyone that uses it. So the only scholar I know that ever used it in any way that was even remotely proper was Aviezer Tucker, and he's since said that it's nonsense to try and use it in regards to history. He's a philosopher and historian out of, I think it's Tel Aviv. He was originally sympathetic to Richard Carrier, but he's since dropped Bayes.
Wasn't there somebody?
Other 3 I know are Richard Carrier, Richard Swinburne, and William Lane Craig. Swinburne and Craig both use it to try and show that Jesus was physically resurrected with high probability.
That was basically, that was very close to the chat the other night before last, the one with Apologia.
Yeah, that's why I can sit right now. My personal opinion of Bayes' theorem when it comes to trying to use it in history is the information we have is incomplete. So any attempt to use Bayes' theorem with that is going to be incomplete, and it all comes down to your personal bias in the end. And so my personal opinion is that it's a complete shit show to try and use it.
Yeah, well,
speaking of uncertainty, we can have this conversation about history for fucking ever, right?
Right. Well, anytime that you bring in a personal bias into something like this, you are looking at, incomplete or, inaccurate information, because you are tainting it by a bias.
Right.
You cannot be objective about it, or cannot, bring into certain facts or things like that will back up your point. You're just going to be going, incredulity. Right.
That's why honestly, that's why I think the best when it comes to trying to, I've seen Bayes' theorem actually used by, I think it was Tucker, to actually try and date one of the books of the Bible, and I can't remember what work it was off the top of my head. I'm sorry, but I just thought it was nonsense, because the best arguments, in my opinion, for trying to date any book of the Bible come down to internal references and the linguistics.
Yeah. Okay.
That's actually hard evidence that you can use. And on the topic of that, so for Job, linguistically, the reason
here we go again.
I can be pretty sure that it's actually dated around the Babylonian exile is actually thanks to this book by N.H. Twersenai, and he provides. I don't unfortunately speak Aramaic or read Aramaic very well at all. I only have some middling knowledge of Hebrew for the most part, but he actually provides a very substantial argument that actually shows that the Book of Job may have actually been an Aramaic original. And if it was written in, and he actually manages to identify it as Babylonian Aramaic. If it was written in Babylonian Aramaic and then translated into Hebrew, which is what he argues, then the best time period for that would be when Babylon had conquered Israel.
Can I throw one thing in here real quick? I know this is going back to the previous topic,
Yeah.
but in the chat right now, I supplied the link to Blake Juntas, who's the guy who debated Matt Dillahunty, and he uses Bayes' theorem to show Bayesian probabilities for the resurrection of Jesus. And I supplied it in the chat right now.
Yes, that's what I was
emailed Blake
talking about.
Junta, and once again, I believe
Here's
it's all bullshit.
Here's my rant about as far as like the study of history and trying to
You can use it
include
either
that
way.
kind of stuff. I mean, sure you can. There's a rule with history, and that is that if you cannot explain the mechanism for which you're trying to put forward as a solution for what happened, then it's not going to be. You shouldn't be using it in history. There's another section for those things that you can't necessarily explain is sacred history, which is there's been a distinction between history and sacred history for a very long time, going back I think to the Greeks. But your history as far as a study needs to be built on things entirely of which you can understand. So, or at least make an argument that you can understand. Therefore, resurrection of the body of Christ, for example, we don't understand what the mechanism for that would have been. So to suggest that it should be included in the study of history means that you should need to include as a point of fact something that you have no idea what is. So, you know, the question from the historical study perspective is going to be, well, why? If you want to start having conversation about like the mysticism aspect of it, there's a different conversation you can have there. But from the perspective of study and trying to give like some kind of demonstration, especially in a study that's built around demonstration, it's not something that's applicable, even Bayes' theorem or not. Don't do it. This is the reason why I don't advocate for like putting Odin in the history books or some shit, right?
Odin,
but it would be a lot cooler if he was.
Well, there are some history books in which he shows up, but that's not. I don't think that it needs to be said that it's a historical fact because he shows up in these books. Just like I don't think that you should include the resurrection of Jesus because you have a document that says that it happened. Like, so, you need to be able to explain what's going on. Now, if Harold Wartooth was killed by Odin as a point of historical fact, like if that's the actual series of events that is later recorded by Saxo Grammaticus, then maybe that's true. But should it be a point of study in history? Not unless you can demonstrate it.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be in the classroom unless it can be demonstrated. It shouldn't be the point of established history. Even if it is the case, it should not be as a part of study unless it can be demonstrated.
I fully agree. One thing I want to actually ask you, Ocean. So when you talk, is because you brought up the Bhagavad Gita earlier, and you were talking about how you thought that may be actually more divinely inspired than the Bible. And one reason I thought that was really interesting is because actually Hinduism and Norse religion are actually related.
If you're talking about like the Indo-European,
the Proto-Indo-European religion,
also called Pi.
Yeah.
That's like a kind of a myriad as far as history goes. There's a lot of people that claim that we can know more about it than we can. There's a lot of conjecture about what the Pi religion was. But there's what irritates me about the Pi theory is that it's it tries to suggest that all polytheistic religions are related, and that all gods are in fact analogs of others. And I don't know if that's something that's you get into a conjecture point when discussing deity that I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with going into that.
There's actually a really good
That's like
good textbook that you might find really that you might actually like on it, because there's actually been a bit of a revolution with leading scholars in it who are dismissing that notion.
Yeah. No,
yeah.
like people have been dismissing it for like the past 20 years.
Not dismissing pi altogether, but dismissing that, you know, all the gods can be linked back to older gods and stuff like that, because there's not much evidence for that. There is evidence that some gods seem to be highly related, like Deus Patar. I mean, he's directly attested in the Vedas.
Ashura, the goddess that we were talking about earlier, seems to be related to several different sex goddesses, including Aphrodite, which is the reason why I was bringing that up.
Yeah.
That there does seem to be, there's some gods where you seem to have relation, and analogs, for example, like the Romans would assign analogs to different gods that they would point out in other cultures. For example, the Norse god Tyr, they said, well, they're worshiping Mars. With Thor, they said, well, they're worshiping Hercules. With Odin, they said, well, they're worshiping Hermes. But when you take a closer look at some of those gods, specifically Odin's analog with Hermes doesn't make a lot of sense.
No.
He does seem to be a very, very distinct god from what Hermes is doing. And it seems that he originates from somewhere else that isn't like continental Europe. Or necessarily, and when I'm saying continental Europe, I'm meaning like mainland Germany. And when you go outside of that, you can get into Scandinavia, which is not considered continental Europe. It's like northern.
Right. The one.
So it might be like a Sami god or something like that.
Yeah. The interesting thing actually with Roman religion and with Greek religion is actually we found out Roman religion actually manages to retain a basic Indo-European religion a lot more than Greek religion does, actually, because the Greeks basically completely merged themselves with the Egyptians and the Phoenicians.
But the Romans merged themselves with the Etruscans, and we can't necessarily tell what's Etruscan and what's not in some cases.
That is also true too. And Etruscan is a whole nother problem, because that's
Etruscan's a giant fucking mystery.
Yeah,
we don't have a complete image of their mythology.
Right, language isolate. Basque is another mystery. Basque, actually, there's some that argue that actually predates Indo-European religion and language altogether.
I'd imagine that there's many traditions that predate religion or predate language. Predating religion is kind of like a weird concept. Not
predating religion, predating Proto-Indo-Europeans.
Oh, okay.
Basque, because Basque is a complete language isolate. I'm
not familiar with Basque. Are you talking about the Egyptian deity, or are you talking about something else?
No. Basque is like it's a language that is spoken by a group of people right around like in northern Spain.
Northern Spain, southern France, going into the Mediterranean area.
Right.
I mean, obviously it's evolved since then, but sure.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Basque culture that's found in the Basque region, in the what is it? Not the Pyrenees.
It's been basking in time.
Basque.
Oh.
Okay. Hey, we've gotten wildly off topic, so
yeah, we're in like 6 different topics to the point where I don't even care what topic we were on in the first place.
And this.
So
I'm just hoping this the statistics guy over there is okay.
I think he is. I'm not sure. He's been silent for a while. You there, Brian?
I'm doing well.
Okay.
Good.
All right.
Good.
I want to try and get us a little bit back on topic.
Actually, let's wrap it up.
Don't get me wrong. This has been enthralling. This is actually, I like it. But
you want it to stop. Okay.
Yeah. Let's right here on that. This would be a great chat. This would be a great subject for another chat. So, but we did start this chat as an after show to the one on the climate.
Right.
Now the theology aspect. Now I do believe that this actually does play into it a bit, because there are a lot of people, a lot of climate change deniers that are basing what they do off of the culture of their religion. How do you guys think that religion plays into the concept of climate change? Because I've heard some people
Christians believe that the world is
People that-
disposable for some reason.
Huh?
That's
Well,
the
it actually depends.
Christians for some reason believe that the world is disposable.
Right.
I don't know
and
why they
that was
think
the
this.
point I was getting to is that I know a lot of people that, well, I've heard from a lot of Christians, all the apocalypse is coming, it's all coming to an end. It's the end of days, Revelation, all that. So we don't need to take care of the planet.
Right, but a good Christian would read the fucking
Ocean.
Bible and go back into seeing that the earth is in our care.
Yeah, we're
Ocean.
But they're not doing that. Okay,
Biker.
what's up, Steve?
Brian wants to say something. Thank you for the super chat, by the way, Brian, very much. Let him say what he's got to say. I got to wrap this up.
Well, I actually didn't know. Sorry, I've been out all day, and I didn't know this was actually the after show for the climate change. And I just really want to say some stuff regarding that. One, mathematically, we know that it has been getting warmer. Now, I'm not a climatologist, so I can't say it's due to humans. But I can say mathematically, we do have evidence that it has been getting warmer. Like, that is just fact. And there's no disputing that. But the problem is where people say there is no statistically significant warming in the last blank amount of years. And what they're actually doing is they're limiting the statistical power by limiting the years. As you limit the sample size, you limit the power. So if I were to say there is no statistically significant warming in the last 3 years, well, yeah, mathematically speaking, we don't assign a very low probability, i.e. p-value, to the last 3 years. So I see a lot of nonsense. Ted Cruz was out there saying there's no statistically significant warming over the last 12 years, and he's just playing games with numbers at that point. Meanwhile, I would say there is statistically significant warming over the last 20 years, because we don't do small samples in statistics. We prefer a larger sample.
Right, and we do have that larger sample because we do have climate records and evidence that does point back to hundreds of thousands of years. From coral reefs, from all sorts of different sources.
We take ice core data.
Right.
We have the satellite data for the last maybe 100 years. Don't quote me on that. But we also have the ice core sample data, and we do kind of reconfigure that data. So I've been very versed in this. I actually have the data on my computer right now, and I've ran the ARIMA models, which stand for autoregressive iterative moving average models. So I've ran the models. I can show you the models, and it's nonsense when people say to me that there has not been significant warming over the last blank amount of years. You're playing games with the numbers. And that's why they say there's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics. But meanwhile, sorry, this is my biggest rant. When I heard we were talking about climate change, I was like, oh, hell no. Because when people tell me there's not statistically significant warming over a blank amount of years, just expand your window. We know that the world is warming. We are very certain at this point that we are going through a warming trend. Now, the Earth cycle is cyclical. We need to go through a decomposition model to look at the cyclical pattern over time. And there's a lot going on here, and there's a lot of information to intake. And I'll just say this is my last rant to go across, and thank you for letting me rant for a moment here. But I would prefer that we don't have the politicians debating this, but we had the data scientists debating this, and they just gave a model, and we saw who gave the best model, and we just went by their model. And that's all we did is we just went by the data. Who gives the best?
That's because you hate democracy.
Damn
communist.
Here, Brian.
I just like data. All I like is data. Just whoever has the best.
I'm with everything that Brian has just said.
R
I like
squared. R squared. Just give me R squared. That's all I want. R squared holdout.
Okay. Well,
that's my end of my rant. Ran over.
Yeah, and that speaks to how the
my response is half serious, but also it's serious. That if once you start to try and like this gets into the political conversation of running a society, that once you start to say, well, we can be authoritarian on issues of science, well, fuck. There's some dangerous territory there.
Right, and that's kind of what we were talking about earlier. Is how the message of climate change and how it's affecting us is being put out there, and how it's affecting people. And it's we've got some people that are on one side of the spectrum. Believe the science, everything else. And you've got the other side of the spectrum, which is it's all a bunch of bullshit. Oh no, it's all wrong. It's they don't have this, and that's what he was speaking to on the statistical model. Is that they're cherry picking. It's basically cherry picking of the data, And I think that we've entered into some pretty dangerous territory when it comes to that as a culture, as society, when it comes to something that could be so important to us.
Let me say something real quick here, because it's not exactly cherry picking. It's close to. I want everyone to think about.
Yeah.
I want everyone to think about 2 points. Just put in your head 2 points, like 2 points on a line. Does that make sense to everyone? 2 points. And now, when you think about those 2 points, what goes through those 2 points?
Yeah. How long is the line between those 2 points?
What goes through any 2 points? A line, right? Does everyone see that? A line.
I was thinking a paragraph.
A line will go through 2 points. The problem with that is
I
what
was
you're
getting like insanely philosophical and like
This
going
is the problem when you bring
back
math
to the
into
discussion I had with Steve about nothing like a week ago or something.
So when you look at 2 points, a line will always go through 2 points. So the problem is when you limit your data to a very small data set, you can't find significant relationships, even if they're very strong. Well, that's up for debate. Strong is a very kind of nebulous term. So they're playing games with the numbers, and I don't like that.
Yeah, well, I don't like it either. I think that's also why the doctor tonight, I think that's part of his point was with saying that, we need to investigate this further. We need to bring in more data and try and get a better, more well-rounded picture of what's actually going on, which in your analogy would extend that line. It would change the line, and put more points on that line.
And here's the biggest thing: a lot of people don't know even the things that cause climate change, which are methane, CO2, and I'm missing one. Oh, methane, CO2, and oh my gosh, talk about me just dropping the ball.
Carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, methane, hydrogen sulfide,
yeah, well, you're doing it better than I
am.
And that's the thing is, I don't actually talk about the descriptive model. I just talk about the predictive model, which says we can tell that the world is getting warmer, and we see evidence of this with the just the math. And that's the biggest thing is I don't need to tell you why it's happening. I just can tell you it is happening. And I can tell you that for certain. And so the big problem is why it's happening. Now that's really the hard part of it. And that's
that's what we were discussing earlier is, why it's happening and how much of an influence that humans are actually having on it, and whether or not that we can use the data that we have now and the data that goes back, like you said, climatology records that go back about 100 years, maybe 150, to support this.
Yeah.
But I don't think that we have enough data.
Water vapor, methane. That's the 3.
Right. I don't think that we have enough data, even though we may have, 150 years of recorded climate history. I still don't think that we have enough data to make an accurate enough prediction like they have been making recently.
No, and let me rant on that for a half second here, because that's a big problem. A lot of what you see with predictive models is they go out, let's say 100 years. That's really insane. No predictive model. Imagine Apple saying, here's what our sales will be 100 years from now. No one's going to believe Apple if they say, here's what our sales will be 100 years from now, because any predictive model actually expands the intervals. This is the standard error of the predictive interval. So the standard error, which is the uncertainty in the prediction interval, actually gets wider the further you go.
Yeah, the larger or the longer you try and predict in the future, the bigger your error of margin becomes.
Correct. The margin of error in the future gets larger the further away you go from the current forecast. So we talk about this as a forecast model. This is my area right here with statistics. So when you're forecasting in the future, it's like Chipotle saying 2 years from now, we will need this much chicken. They don't really know. I mean, they might have a good idea due to seasonal influence, but if they said 200 years from now, you would believe that forecast a lot less. So that's why, and I'll say this, I believe climate change is happening. I believe humans are a big part of climate change, but I do not like climate change models that go 100 years in the future.
Now that was my question that I wanted to ask you, since statistical analysis is your forte, is your fort? I should use the correct. I'm not playing an instrument loudly, but your fort is statistical. So, I mean, they've said that we've got this catastrophic thing coming by 2050. We'll be 3 to 5 degrees Celsius warmer. Now, with the data that we have, do you think that they can make a prediction 30 years in the future with what we have already.
I've seen the confidence intervals. We talk about 95% confidence intervals, which is a z-score of 1.96. Most people know that.
Speak English for those who don't
Okay.
speak English.
So basically, when someone says I'm going to arrive here between 5 and 7, and I'm 95% confident, you would think, okay, they really believe they're going to arrive here between 5 to 7. So when they say the world will be 3 degrees warmer, they're probably telling you that they are 95% confident, i.e., that person telling you with their time they're going to arrive, the world will be warmer by 1 to 5 degrees, because it's a plus or minus. It's like everything you see with intervals. So yes, we are certain the world is getting warmer. The interval does not contain 0, so we are seeing an increase in global temperatures. We are pretty certain of that, as far as we can be regarding p-values. But the further away you go from where we're at, next year will be warmer, the following year will be warmer, and I'm uncertain about 2050. I'd like to see the interval, I'd like to see the estimates, and I do fear that we are fear-mongering a little bit. I mean,
yeah, that's one thing that I actually was getting onto earlier.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, the biggest thing is, I wish them, when they reported this, they didn't just say the world will be 3 degrees warmer. I wish they said we are 95% confident the world will be between 1 to 5 degrees warmer. Like, give the margin of error on the estimate, because there is uncertainty in that estimate.
Right. And that's part of what we were talking about earlier, is that there's been a lot of hyperbole or hyperbolic statements that have been made, a lot of propaganda towards it. And I don't see that it's, as accurate as it could possibly be.
Yeah.
And that we're falling into a trap.
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing is, if you go to 2200, I'm sure the interval would be, the world will be 6 degrees warmer plus or minus 8 degrees, because the further away you go, the less certain you are, because it's just it's like predicting what will Apple make, the company Apple make 200 years from now. I mean, we might know what they make next year via what they made this year, but the further away we go from where we're predicting, the less certain we are. That's just how the interval works.
The more the uncertainty goes up.
Yeah, the uncertainty goes up.
I took one basic class in statistical analysis and number theory. So I'm with you on a lot of this, but it's been a long time.
This is a time series model. It's an ARIMA forecast, which once again stands for autoregressive iterative moving average. And so this is an ARIMA model. It's forecasting, and we have math to do this. And I wish they just showed the interval. I don't think we should give the estimate. I think we should give the interval.
Do you think that, average people would actually be able to understand that, though?
Yeah, we hear polls on the president every day saying the president's approval rating is 44% plus or minus 3%. So they could say the world in 2050 will be 4 degrees warmer plus or minus 3 degrees.
Right. And so you think that if they were to actually put that out, that people would have a better understanding instead of becoming so polarized on the issue?
I think it would be more honest, and I think they're purposely doing it to polarize. I'm a liberal. I do think the world is getting warmer. I do think we need to make some changes. That's where we have to have the debate, because we need to talk about this in a civil society where we say, here's what I think, here's the changes I think would be good to help society. But I do think they are polarizing by not giving the interval and putting out a number, which is a number based on math, and then not giving the uncertainty in that number.
Okay. All right. Now, what do you think about, this is a question for Oceans, since you're into the theology kind of side of things, or the religious aspect. What do you think that the religious influence on the perception of climate changes has been having recently?
I mean, there's a huge distinction between, say, Christians and myself on this issue.
Right.
Christians have the position of being like, there's two things. One is that you have Christians in their book suggesting that the earth was created for humans and that we're charged with taking care of it. That seems to be the point of the first couple of chapters of Genesis, that we are the caretakers, we're the masters of the planet. So you would think that Christians would then be like huge environmentalists, but then they have this whole like apocalypse theory in their head that is a mess. Yeah, so it winds up with this idea that, well, Jesus is going to come back and everybody's going to, the world's going to become the new heaven. And there's a prophecy that this is going to happen regardless of what happens. So we don't need to take care of the planet.
Right.
And then there's also Christians that are like, well, let's hurry this process up. So
right. There's been I've come across a lot of these you know, these people who are into the revelation part
Yeah.
of the
And
Christian dogma that, you know, says, oh yeah, it's all going to end. Why should we do this? You know,
Islam has the same problem of,
yeah,
well, if humanity ends due to climate change, well, that means our prophecies are wrong. So why do anything about it? And
well, Hinduism has a very similar thing as well.
I don't know what the issue is as far as Hinduism is concerned with this. I'm not as familiar with Hinduism. But I am familiar with as far as like Western polytheists. We tend to have like a
polytheists have to say. What would you say that the other Western polytheistic philosophy or religions would have to say on the same?
Generally, we're big environmentalists. And a lot of the extremists among us tend to have that packaged in, that they're like extremely environmentalist.
Now you're talking more of the paganistic religions, more stuff like Celtic paganism, stuff like that.
Even Germanic as well.
Celtic.
Heathen Celtic religion, all of these. There's a few, like Roman religion, for example, has a lot of veneration of civilization and organization in its civilization, but they also have a lot of nature deities. And the taking care of nature is a respect of those nature deities. When you get into Celt and Germanic, those nature deity aspects are a lot more represented and a lot more commonly venerated. So you do get much more environmentalist types among that, even with you have stuff like Ragnarok and so on as being like apocalyptic, but we don't. First, I don't hold to Ragnarok, and second, those that do don't necessarily believe it to be something that is imminent or affects us in the same way that the whole Jesus coming back affects us. Like humans aren't redeemed in Ragnarok or anything. There's no narrative like that. So right, it's the world gets fucked. So sun is swallowed and there's years of winter and all this other bullshit. Again, things that I don't hold to, but it's a prophecy that exists. It's probably very Christian, but it's there. And you get some pagans that do take it very seriously, but it's not from it doesn't manifest itself in the same way of, well, because this prophecy exists, therefore the world is disposable. That's not the effect.
Right.
But that does seem to be the effect with Christians.
Right. And now I've read up a lot on Mesoamerican and Native American shamanism, and they have a lot of parallels with a lot of a very close association with the natural world, a lot of minor deities or a lot of beliefs about the natural world and how they're so closely they're so closely related to humans and their relationship to the environment. So I can see the parallels with that, with things like, the paganistic religions of, Western Europe. I also see some of the same things in a lot of Hinduism. There's some in some of the Eastern traditions as well. Some of this stuff.
I'm not huge as far as Eastern traditions, but from what I've experienced of Shinto, I visited Japan and I've been to a couple of temples, and from what I know of it, it does seem to have like a very big balance to nature approach. And Taoism is very much the same way. Where I've read the Tao Te Ching, I consider myself at least partially a Taoist. That there is a big balance of nature, preservation of nature, respect the planet kind of attitude in that as well. So it does provide easy access to those kind of beliefs in those faiths. So. When you're talking about religion's effect on environmentalism, I would say mostly it's good. Like most religions, it seems, have packaged in it respect the fucking planet, respect nature in general.
Yeah,
but
respect
when you get into Christianity, and honestly, Abrahamic monotheism, I'm not sure about if this applies to Judaism, but it does apply to the expansion pacts. That there does seem to be this disposable idea about what the planet.
I love That's good.
On your
Let me go to Christopher on this, because he tends to be a lot more versed in the Judeo-Christian view on this. What is your take on how it's affecting the views on environmentalism and particularly the climate?
It really depends on the group. So the problem that we have. It's one reason I just despise generalizing Christianity as one thing. I mean, 40,000 different denominations for one.
I mean,
Right.
same here. If you want to get into like Episcopalians, they tend to be environmentalists. But
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
I'm
And
talking
that's the
about
thing,
generally,
it all
this
depends
is an
on-
issue.
Episcopalians are basic. I mean, they're basically Christian liberals for the most part.
Right.
The United Methodist Church, I mean, for the most part, they're basically diet Episcopalians.
Yep.
Then you have the Lutheran
Presbyterians as well.
the Lutheran Church, depending on your synod, is usually either pretty open, or if you're from the other synod, it's can be radical conservative. Presbyterians, again, that ranges between your basically individual churches. Those can go anywhere from being environmentalist, liberal, freebie people to being ultra conservative nuts.
Now my question is evangelical or Baptist? Because those are the ones that I've seen more personally from my experience. I've seen a lot more of the evangelical Christian or the Baptist that are the ones that tend to be a lot more conservative and a lot more in the denial mode.
And you're right. It's primarily, I'd say, it's primarily the Southern Baptist Church, which is actually a lot more organized than people think it is. It actually has an entire overarching administration and 12 million people in its membership, or so, something like 12 to 20. So it's I believe actually the single largest Protestant denomination.
You're talking about Southern Baptist Convention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, would you say that is because they're the ones that are more likely to adhere to the the whole apocalypse, the Revelation?
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
Part of it, see, the Baptists don't like admitting it, but part of it is actually due to their influence from Calvinism. It's funny.
Don't tell them that.
Now,
Don't tell them that.
It's a mixed bag in the Baptist church, because half of the Baptists I know hate calling themselves Calvinists. The other ones, if you're like James White, is like, I'm a Baptist and a good Calvinist. So it just depends on your brand of Baptist, I guess. But it really their end times nuttery is really because of a lot of it to do with their Calvinistic ideology,
Right.
and they're the ones that primarily push it as well.
Okay, and that is also due to their evangelical nature as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, right. I don't like that. I really dislike the term evangelical, just because it's like a catch-all right now.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like saying SJW or feminazi. At this point, it's just become a catch-all for anyone
Well,
that
they're proselytizing.
It's a technical term though too, because it does
it
reference.
It is a technical term, but only in specific circumstances. And the problem is that evangelical, when we talk about it, generally refers to conservative, outgoing street preacher type churches in particular.
I think when I'm doing it, when I'm referring to it, it's like that block of Christianity that contains about 50 million people, or even more than that.
Demographic, and that's one thing that we
More
have
like
to take.
maybe more like 100, but it's a shitload of Christians.
Yeah, it's a lot of.
Well, that's the thing. The thing is actually, so when you actually look at the statistics, so I mean Brian's not here anymore.
Damn, we lost our statistics.
I think this is an old statistic, but I think it's like 45% of Christianity is evangelicals in America.
Yeah, that is old at this point.
That's very old. That's probably dropped since then. But
one thing that's actually been consistently happening in America is actually a decline in religiosity.
Overall, yeah.
Specifically, a decline in fundamental religiosity. So still 72% of the nation identifies as Christian. The last poll I was able to see from a peer-reviewed source, and that was Pew Research Forums. But what we've actually been observing. Oh, Brian's back! Yay!
Hey,
But one thing that we've been observing is that so I think we would agree one of the main characteristics of evangelical Christianity is creationism, right?
Right.
Well,
no, I would disagree.
Why?
because you do get. I don't think that it's something that's overarching among evangelicals.
I do.
You do?
Name 5 evangelical organizations.
Oh, I'm not that good.
Yeah. Any evangelical organization you name, I could probably find a link that ties them to creationist organizations, or they will actively publicly condone creationism.
Yeah, most of them do things like focus on the family.
What I'm talking about is evangelical Christians as individuals. Like
Yeah,
you
and
could
as
say
individ-
mostly creationist, but I think that there's definitely exceptions. I think that exception is probably not a statistical outlier.
I mean, there's no. I think within evangelical Christianity, because I mean, the vast majority of Christians in the world are evolutionists. Vast majority of them aren't evangelicals.
Yeah.
You know what? In the world, sure.
Well, that's only
But
The
look
vast
at
majority of
America.
Christians aren't in America.
Yeah, but if you look in
it's-
America, the thing is that you were saying probably around what 80 to 100 million evangelicals in here.
in America,
Yeah.
probably.
Well,
And that's less than a third of our population.
Yeah. Well, do you know how much? Do you know how much of our population actually adheres to creationism?
I have no idea.
About a third.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you look at the
I'm not saying it ain't a correlate, because you have the same thing in South Korea, right? Where there's a lot of evangelicals there, and there's also a lot of creationism. So yeah, there's definitely a correlate.
I don't know North Korean statistics. I don't.
South
trust.
Korea.
Yeah, he's talking about
South Korea has a lot of evangelicals and a lot of creationists.
Yeah, it does. It does. That's primarily due to our
influence. Yeah.
Well, to the colonialization and the introduction of the religion to that area. But my question is, would there be a way by using their religious dogma and using religion to actually get them to change their view, or to at least try and influence their view on environmentalism and specifically climatology or climate change?
I don't think so, because I mean, when you look at these evangelical organizations, their biggest in my experience, the biggest reason that they deny that climate change happens is because they think God won't let that happen.
Okay. So you think it would be almost a waste of time?
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to argue with that point when it comes to Christians, just because that with the nature of what their God is,
right?
They're going to hand like a lot of problems that they have. There's a Christian habit of handing it over to God and letting Him handle it. So if you wind up taking that approach with
God's hands,
climate change, all of a sudden they just don't do anything. They become very complacent.
As my philosophy professor Stephen Wanmacher said, Stevens, I should say, the problem with the Christian God is because he just becomes a catch-all for every single problem you have.
Right.
Yeah, that is an issue with the Christian God.
Pagans have the added advantage of recognizing that they have flawed gods and they aren't going to be fixing your problems.
Yeah, a lot of times.
At least not all the time.
Your problems. they're messing with you.
In some stories, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of stories like that. You know, Loki, for fuck's sake, come on.
Loki is that's a whole topic. But
I know. I don't want. Let's not go down that rabbit hole. That's
yeah. Put it this way, I don't necessarily recognize Loki.
Yeah, the better example would just be saying Greek religion.
Yeah.
End of story.
So
Greek religion does have a lot of that.
You can sum it up as Zeus stuck his dick in it.
Okay, that's a new one. All right, that's
no, I've heard that before.
You literally
the Greek mythology is basically a record of Zeus's sexual exploits.
Yeah, pretty much.
But you know, what the heck?
Literally, Zeus fucks everything up
and fucks everything. So anyway,
well, I mean, his sons are interesting. You get Alexander, right?
Right. So Ocean, we haven't heard a whole lot about. I haven't heard a hell of a lot from you about what's your view on the climate issue, I guess we would say.
I mean, I'm mostly on the same side as your typical left-leaning guy on the climate. Like I think that we should be enacting solutions in order to slow climate change as much as possible. It's evident that it's happening.
Now, do you believe that? And I'm asking this primarily because that you know you are a polytheist, and I can see that you tend to think a little bit differently than the vast majority of the population in that respect. But do you believe that there's a lot of influence or propaganda that's been going along with the dissemination of the message?
I mean, duh.
Yeah.
It's turned into a political issue. So
Okay.
you know, but there's a problem with it from both the left and the right. From my perspective, is from what I see. You know, we can care a lot about climate change, but a lot of the propaganda that's put around, especially on the left end, is about personal actions, about how you can change things, like with your personal usage and the amount of trash that you create. The thing is that a lot of the actions that we do are not as much of a contributor to overall climate change as like large conglomerates are. So when you
Right.
get into agricultural practices, for example, especially by corporations, corporate agricultural practices that involve dumping as much chemical fertilizer onto land as much as possible, and then getting giant runoffs into Florida, which cause this red tide, that
Right.
kind of thing. That's
Right.
something that you know you could have a mass awareness throughout Florida in which everybody recognizes what the problem is, and that the vast majority of the population modifies their actions in order to fix it, and it negligibly affects the problem, because the actual source of the problem has to do with a handful of people and what they're doing, not with the general population. And I think that's true with climate change generally, is that what the solutions that need to be put forward have to do with regulations on how companies are running themselves and how they're affecting the environment, what they're releasing into the air, and what they're running off into the ocean, or
Well, yeah,
fishing
that's
practices,
the
and
first
just
part.
dumping of nets and all this other kind of bullshit. Like there's all kinds of crap that's going on worldwide that have to do with a handful of people ruining our environment, where the vast majority of people could resume their daily activities in exactly the same way that we are, and we wouldn't have this problem. But what's the
Okay.
solution? The one that we get now is we want to try and fix what everybody else is doing so that we can negligibly fix the problem. And the higher ups, people that are making a bunch of money, can continue to make a bunch of money and continue blindly walking towards this cliff. Fuck that.
Right. Okay. Well, no, that's very insightful. You know, that's very good. I like that. You know,
Hey,
well, at least you put it well. Your position. So, um,
so hey, I'm gonna have to drop out because
Yeah, we gotta end this.
2
yeah.
a.m. in
Actually, I
Michigan.
think we are going to go ahead. We've been going for what, almost 3 hours now. So we've been going quite a while.
Over now, over
Oh,
3.
over 3.
Yep.
Oh yeah, yeah, over 3. So, this has been good. We kind of derailed for a little while. We got onto the whole theology thing. That was okay. You know, it was interesting, but this was a good after show. But I think we're finally to the point. Christopher needs to go. I'm getting tired. I got to go to bed. And I know that Steve is tired of probably listening to us blather on. So I think we're probably going to call it here. And any final comments from everybody on climate and the earlier chat tonight, or the earlier
I would
section?
give a final comment as far as like piggybacking off of the fucking thing that I said, is that don't take that as an interpretation of don't do anything. Obviously, your personal behavior can affect the fucking climate. What my point was about was in relation to propaganda and what people are trying to say that we should do about it versus what the problem actually is.
I'll just throw in my 2 cents before I end this, Brian. Yes, I'm still here. Justin James, thank you for the $2. Hermes sends the message of thanks for the after show. You're welcome. Brian, do you want to say something? And then I'm going to take it off air, but I'll say my last. Yeah,
Sure.
I'll give it.
My last comments are, if I'm just tired of people like Ted Cruz playing games with the numbers, because climate change is happening. We need to discuss why it's happening, and that's what we need to get to the heart of, because it is happening. I mean, it's just a fact.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else, or is that it?
Brian Stevens.
Okay.
Hit me up. I put my Gmail in there, so hit me up because I'd love to like talk to you. Maybe do a live show on like Bayesian stats and stuff.
I'll do my best to talk about that.
Okay. We've only got one more. If he's still there, Brian, are you there?
I'm here.
Do you have any final thoughts? Any closing thoughts on the climate issue that we talked about?
No, just basically need to look into it more and start. I need to educate myself on the terminology and statistics, and I think it's been a good start. This has been an awesome show.
All right, thank you. And my position is this: look at, I'm convinced beyond all doubt that the climate is changing, and I'm convinced that it is warming, and I do believe that it's anthropogenic, and I do believe humans are causing it, whether it's greenhouse gas or carbon fluorocarbons or hydrofluorocarbons or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. It is humans. Whatever we do to help cut that back is going to help. One way or another. Whatever we do, it's better than doing nothing, because we are at the tipping point, and I don't think it's going to last another couple decades. And I don't want my daughter's grandchildren to be raised in a earth that is just not even inhabitable any longer, because 50 years from now it could be inhabitable at that point. I mean, we're heading toward a catastrophe, and I'm not an alarmist by any means. People know that, but I think there is something to be said by, if we don't get this under control, there will be major ecological disasters. And if you think otherwise, that's fine, but I'd rather err on the side of cautions. So anyways, good night, guys.
Okay.